The Evergy Economic Development Team is proud to support the growth of jobs and financial investment in communities throughout our service area. The mission of the Evergy Economic Development Team is to attract new business, nurture existing customers, and invest in strategic partnerships, creating an ecosystem where businesses and communities thrive together. The Evergy Economic Development Team is dedicated to being the service area of choice for businesses, fostering vibrant communities and empowering lives. Evergy provides comprehensive support for businesses and encourages economic growth in communities through local partner programs and funding to help build strong business environments. Evergy provides comprehensive support for businesses and encourages economic growth in communities through local partner programs and funding to build strong business environments. Evergy is pleased to celebrate success and share the recent wins of our partners, ready to support you and your prosperity.
All right. Mic check, 1, 2, 3. Good morning. Oh, it's not working. I'll try it again. Okay. Mic check, 1, 2, 3. Good morning. Excellent. Thank you. Shout out to our award-winning economic development team located at Evergy Connect, Wichita. Thank you, Ebony Clemens, for leading our economic development efforts in Kansas and Missouri. Go ahead and give it up so I don't have to deal with it the rest of the day. Thank you. On behalf of the 5,000 employees at Evergy, I welcome you to the 2025 Kansas Economic Outlook Conference. Shout out to Wichita State University, as I believe this is their 46th year, I believe. Evergy is proud to be a partner of WSU, not only as presenting sponsor for this conference. We also partnered with WSU on their Spiro Career Readiness Program, where we were able to provide, did I hear another shout out? Okay, that's cool. Where we were able to provide entry-level full-time employment to a Spiro graduate. She is awesome, and our partnership with WSU is a win-win. For more information about Spiro, please reach out to Dr. Jennings' group at the WSU Frank Barton School of Business. Now, knowing that we are only as strong as the communities we serve, we created Evergy Connect to connect the community. Whether your business or nonprofit organization needs space for an off-site meeting, or if you personally just need downtown work area for an hour or for the whole day, we got you. Just reach out to us at amber.sims@evergy.com. At Evergy Connect, our goal of 20,000 customer and community touch points per year has already been surpassed. I recently read where over 99% of all businesses are small businesses, and over 47% of the private sector workforce is from small business. Now, I got that off the internet, so it has to be true, right? I'm just asking. Regardless, I'm a serial entrepreneur, and I want it to be true. I thoroughly enjoy when we host small business cohorts at Evergy Connect, like our community partners for Nexus. Shout out to Mary Beth Jarvis and Amber Dunn. Right here, this is Evergy Connect in 24 seconds. Cue the video, please. Now, that video was just made a couple of weeks ago where the Kansas Department of Commerce, City of Wichita, Sedgwick County Government, and Wichita Public Schools were at Evergy Connect talking to a cohort from the Nexus group. Fast forward 2 weeks later, our colleagues over at Cargill and our partners at Evergy Supplier Engagement met with that same cohort group 2 weeks later at Evergy Connect. So we love doing that. So simply put, at Evergy Connect, we simply connect. Now on with the show. It's indeed an honor to welcome a distinguished leader whose vision continues to shape both our university and our community. Please welcome to the stage the president of the Wichita State University, Dr. Rick Muma.
Thank you, Don. Good morning. Don, it's not working still. Good morning. All right. It's a pleasure to welcome you to the annual Kansas Economic Outlook Conference. Each year, this event brings together leaders from business, government, education, and the community to take a clear-eyed look at the economic forces shaping our future. The purpose of today is to better understand the challenges and opportunities ahead. We'll hear from experts who will provide insights into the national economy, as well as the state and local trends that affect each of us directly. Their perspective and conversations will help us reflect and adapt to continue building a stronger foundation for growth. At Wichita State and other universities, we know how important these conversations are. The success of our students is tied to the success of this region. When innovation and industry grow, when communities prosper, our graduates have more opportunities to contribute, lead, and succeed. This conference reflects the power of partnerships between Wichita State and the business community, and when we come together like this, we're shaping tomorrow for all of Kansans and this community. Thank you for being here, for engaging in these discussions, and for your commitment to advancing Wichita and Kansas. I wish you a productive and insightful conference. Now, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention one other thing. We have a lot of things going on campus today, including this. Back in 1970, our plane crashed carrying our football team and our coaches and our supporters of the team crashed in 1970 and rocked this community and Wichita State. Today is the 55th anniversary of that crash, and we are celebrating that later on campus, and I'll be leaving here to preside over that event. So let's take a moment of silence to recognize the 31 people lost 55 years ago today. Thank you. So, on with the show. To guide us through today's event, I'd like to introduce you to Dottie Harpool, Executive Director of Engagement and Prominence in the Barton School of Business at Wichita State. Dottie has been a driving force of the Barton School for many years, sharing her expertise and always finding new ways to connect with people and ideas. Let's give Dottie a very warm welcome.
Yeah, that's my boss's boss's boss. So no pressure. Good morning again. I'm not going to make you say that. I think you've said it enough today already. But welcome to the 2025 Kansas Economic Outlook Conference. We have an amazing lineup of speakers for you today from all over the United States and from various different sectors of our economy. They will help us explore what Kansas will look like in 2075, which is 50 years. It's early, but do some math. It's 50 years from now. So let's all get ready to imagine and ideate what it's going to look like here in Kansas in 2075. But before we dive in, we have some housekeeping notes. Coffee, it's in the back. It will constantly be filled. I've been there 3 times. We know coffee is essential at this hour, so feel free to visit the stations at the back. A special thank you to our coffee break sponsors. Workforce Alliance of South Central Kansas for keeping us caffeine fueled this morning. And what better way to enjoy coffee and to actually talk to strangers? We have a networking area, and that networking area is provided by the John A. Marshall Company, so be sure to stop back there and meet some new people. There are some amazing people, all of you are amazing, but there are a lot of people in this room that do amazing things. And it's really important for us as we move forward to know those people. And this is a great opportunity for you to meet somebody different and to really connect and see how they do their job, their company works, and we can really grow together. To follow along with today's program, visit eoc2025.cedbr.org. There'll be a test later. There you can download the speaker's PowerPoint slides, view the agenda, and see a speaking list for the attendees. Join the digital conversation. Share your insights, snapshots, and standout moments. Make your voice heard on LinkedIn and other social media platforms using hashtag KSECON, and be sure to follow CEDBR for updates during the year. Finally, be sure to take advantage of our photo booth over there to get some individual and group shots to share on your social. Thank you for Emprise Bank for sponsoring this edition this year. It is my pleasure now to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Becca Selby Leach, Director of the Center for Economic Development and Business Research, and also is the lead fashion forward dressed individual in our room today. She's going to kick off our journey today. Becca provides in-depth analysis of economic conditions and forecasts that shape decisions for businesses and policymakers across Kansas. She's here to walk us through the forecast and explain and explore today's big question: what will Kansas look like in 2075? Becca.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming today. This is a tremendous turnout. Thank you so much. This is my first time leading this event, and we couldn't do it without our wonderful staff that put all of this together. So can I give one round of applause for my staff? They're amazing. The theme of today's talk is Kansas on the Verge. The Verge is chosen intentionally. We're standing at a threshold, a point where the choices we make today will shape our economic future. Over the next few minutes, we'll explore what that means, the national backdrop, Kansas's own forecast, and the scenarios that could define our path forward. As you listen, I invite you to try to answer the question, on the verge of what? Recently, I attended the Wichita Business Journal's ICT Summit. How many of you were there? I had a suspicion that a number of you would have come to that event. At this event, a lot of our leaders discussed the future of Wichita and Kansas as a whole. Throughout the sessions, because I'm a data person, I took notes and collected data. This is what I heard. As a Kansas community, we feel that we are at a tipping point, that change is imminent. We feel a sense of urgency and a wave of momentum carrying us forward, and we feel that we have a choice to make. All of the words on these slides that are in all caps are verbatim what I heard from our leaders. to support growth in areas like biomedical research, healthcare, and aerospace, and to address key challenges such as quality education, alignment of priorities, and barriers to economic development. And to foster key relationships and friendships that harness our innate passion and beliefs on stewardship and intentionality of actions. I didn't click through fast enough. Lastly, to start to believe that we are in fact worthy of excellence. I believe that Kansans are worthy of excellence, and everything that we do can be excellent. So moving on into the theme of this presentation a bit more, Kansas on the verge. When I say Kansas is on the verge, I don't mean it lightly. A verge is a threshold, an edge where one step further means transformation. We're standing at that edge right now. The theme of this talk, Kansas on the Verge, collides with that the theme of the conference, which is Kansas in 2075. The actions that we take today will determine our future for ourselves and for our children and for our grandchildren. We have choices to make. Change is happening whether we want to or not. Technologies such as AI and automation are changing the game. Environmental challenges are testing how we manage our resources and plan. Societal shifts are changing what workers want, what consumers value, and how communities grow. And of course, the economic environment is pressing on businesses and families. Change is inevitable. The question is whether we steer it or it steers us. So I'll put the question back to you. Are we on the verge of being left behind? On the verge of something great? And what does something great look like for Kansas? I invite you to ideate. You're going to hear that several times today, to imagine what we can do to explore, or as we talk about this current state of the economy, I want you to ideate on what that means for you in your space. And we are going to hear lots more from experts leading these changes, or in the spaces leading these changes. Before we can talk about Kansas, though, we have to recognize that there's some larger forces that are shaping our path. The national economy is slowing. We're seeing this in the data all over the place. GDP growth, when I put these together, things are always changing. GDP growth is holding around 2%, but it does appear to be slowing. It's not declining, which is good, but it is not growing nearly as fast as it was. Unemployment has risen. We're up around 4.3%. I would be false in saying that that's a bad number. In fact, anybody who asks me, I say, that's a great number. That's a good number to be at. That's full employment. However, the trajectory has been upward, so that labor market may be weakening. Employment gains are still positive, sometimes zero, sometimes negative, and we're not quite sure what's happening in that space. Inflation is around 2.9%, and within different special commodities, considerably higher, and for some, considerably lower, but generally 2.9% isn't something that we are worried about, but it has been ticking upwards. And the yield curve, a classic recession indicator, is in a U-shape, which indicates potential transitionary periods. So in short, the U.S.-Kansas economy isn't currently in crisis, but it's moving into a slower, more fragile territory. And Kansas, as always, will feel the effects. So what does that national slowdown mean for Kansas? Our state is slowing, but it's not in decline. Most of us out there are watching closely to see what will happen. Some industries are doing fairly well, to be honest. We talked to a lot of industry leaders, and things are feeling pretty good. We asked our Way Out members, and they're feeling fairly optimistic. However, there are signals that things are holding steady. However, we're in a period of high uncertainty, so for this forecast, we introduced the status quo, grow, and slow as a way to provide you futures forecasts that are more robust and can give you an idea of actions that you can take as leaders in this economy. So let's move into some of the data. I know you came here for all the data. How many of you've been here before? You're going to be asked that later, I'm sure, but a few of you have been here before, and we're a data-forward center. So let's take a look at employment. Employment in Kansas, while cyclical, has followed a general upward pattern. You can see that along the line, the black line on this chart here. However, if you look really close, that line is starting to flatten towards the most recent years. We're starting to see the slope of that line starting to come down. Not necessarily a bad thing. Employment, according to many of the economists that we're listening to, is largely reflecting right now that we have enough jobs for the amount of people that we have. And we wouldn't anticipate employment to rise in that situation. So it slowing does not necessarily mean that it's a bad thing. It just means that we're in that space where employment is matching the number of jobs that we have. When we look within industry, this is more nuanced. When we take a look at mining, logging, and construction, there was a gigantic increase post-pandemic. You can see that right here. Kind of hard to talk and point. Where we had a very flat trajectory there. The pandemic hits, and we very much on an upward trajectory after that. However, our forecasts are suggesting a slowdown even here as people wade through uncertainty. Hiring slows when people are not sure what's coming next year. So even in a growth industry like this one, we would anticipate a slowdown. In private education and health services, we've seen a general upward trend as well. Very strong. You can see the pandemic took it down, but it's back. Private health and education and health services appears to be back on track, and we don't forecast a tremendous slowdown in this space because it's really hard to slow down in healthcare services. So we anticipate a little bit more of the same. However, I will say that there are opportunities in this space, and we'll talk about that in a moment. Financial services activities is interesting in the state. It's up, it's down, it's all around. But generally speaking, it fell during the pandemic. It came back up, but we don't anticipate that upward trajectory to necessarily continue. There really is nothing sustaining that upward pressure on that one. So we think it may have overcorrected even and may come down a little bit as we see further automation and advancement in that space. So our forecasts are for limited growth in 2026 in that financial services. It's and potentially even a slight decline as it corrects. There are a couple different industries that are not necessarily growing in the state in terms of employment. And that, again, not necessarily a bad thing, but a decline is interesting in these cases. We're taking a look at information services first. Information services have had a long downward trajectory, further exacerbated by the pandemic. It did recover. Interestingly, over-recovered. You can see that the trajectory changed. If you look really closely, and you can see these on my slides later on, we have a gray line here which shows the trajectory we were on, and now the trajectory we are currently on after the pandemic. And we can see that if that trajectory continues, it would be downward. But again, we are forecasting stagnation here as people hire and fire less as they're trying to navigate uncertainty. Clicked in advance. Professional and business services are also on this slide here. You can see that that one has also changed in a similar way. And a big portion of what's happening in this space for both of these is automation and AI adoption. Over time, we're starting to see information services hire fewer and fewer journalists and more people to maintain data centers. And data centers require fewer and fewer people. It is not very labor intensive. Professional and business services also have started to benefit from having those automation and AI services, and that augments labor, but that also means that we don't necessarily need as many people to run those offices. So when I was talking about uncertainty, it's really hard to know exactly how it's going to play out over the next year because there's a lot of unknowns and tariffs and the labor market weakening, federal policy, how that's going to play out. So I put together a series of future scenarios here. There's basically only 3 things that can happen. We can stay on our path, we can grow, or we can slow. The status quo is the situation I think is most likely for employment in this case. This is one where our automation is somewhat slow over the next year, and I think it won't be slow in the medium to long term, but I do think it will be slower in the next year as people are holding back in their investments, waiting to see what happens. So I think 2026 will be characterized as a period of hold off and wait and see how it all plays out. So slower automation, tight labor market potentially weakening now. When I did this one again, think about forecasts, they're only good up until the moment that you run them. But I would say a little less likely to have a tight labor market than before, and limited population growth. The only way to get to that growth scenario is to bring in high employment workers. So we would have to bring in new employers that hire humans, not necessarily just machines. And we would need people to take those jobs. So we need a combination of those 2 things in order to reach a growth environment. Slow, on the other hand, is where we have an exit. It is possible that this happens where our businesses decide it's better to do business somewhere else. And that could happen for a variety of reasons. It could happen because of business regulation, taxation. It could happen because it's cheaper to do business somewhere else. And there's a lot of potential situations there. A lot of times it happens because businesses want to be in the same space as other businesses in their industry. And so if we don't harness or bring in more and more business that in a specific industry, we can see exit. We can also see a slowdown in employment if we go into automation remarkably fast in a way that is not labor augmenting, if we go into a way that is labor replacing. However, I do think that this is a lower probability outcome, especially in the short run, and especially given the advice that I'm hearing from experts in these fields. So generally speaking, for employment, probably a status quo situation. When we take a look at labor market dynamics, we start to see a story of fewer and fewer people in that active labor market, where they're either employed or unemployed. The top chart here shows the labor force participation rate has been declining consistently over the last decade. Now, this can happen for a lot of different reasons, but generally speaking, our economists think that it's largely related to the retirement of people who are of retirement age, now the baby boomer generation, which was a larger population. And so we have more and more people who are unemployed, but there are some reasons to suggest that labor force participation rates might be changing for certain other types of groups of individuals, such as young prime-age males. We've seen that when we look a little bit deeper. So that is suggested. And I do think that that trend will continue downward. However, it is slow. That downward trend will be negligible necessarily in the next year, but maybe not in the next 10 years. Now, where does it stop? That really kind of depends on what happens to automation and the role of human labor in our markets. Our employment to population ratio is generally pretty static at around 65%. It does not change very much. That's just total number of employees divided by population. However, during periods of recession, this does drop. And we can see that during the COVID-19 pandemic, it did drop considerably here, but it recovered just as fast. And that's the story of Kansas being very resilient. You can see in the most recent year, since about January 2024, the employment to population ratio has started to slowly decline. Keep hitting the wrong button, look at that. You can see just a slight decline here, and I do suggest that that may continue to decline into the next year. The unemployment rate, when I forecasted this, I wasn't quite sure which way that one would go. I'm a little less optimistic today than I was when I created these slides last week. But I do think that the unemployment rate is likely to move upwards into the next year as the labor markets loosen up somewhat. But I don't want to make that sound like it's a bad thing. It has been a very tight labor market, and people aren't switching jobs and moving up the way that we would anticipate them doing that. So having a slightly looser labor market is actually healthier in this case. So whether it goes above that, that is yet to be seen. Our gross domestic product, or the measure of how productive our economy is generally a very strong upward trend, about 2% per year, perhaps a little slower than that depending on when we're looking. The pandemic did change things, again, for this space. I will say that we lost steam during the pandemic and we didn't fully recover. In fact, we changed our trajectory. You can see that as a shift on this chart to the right of the trajectory. And I do anticipate more upward movement in our GDP, our productive output. I don't anticipate complete flattening here, but I do anticipate somewhat slowing. As I've said throughout, that we have our employers and businesses holding steady, waiting to see what happens as we move into the next year. Within industry, again, a nuanced story. When we take a look at durable goods manufacturing, very important here in Wichita, with our aerospace being remarkably large, that has shown generally a really strong upward trend. It doesn't really show any early signs of slowing. I will say that with the tariffs out there and the potential concerns with quality of the supply chain, that could potentially slow it down a little bit, but it has a strong upward growth, and I do anticipate more of the same. In the information sector, this is a reverse story from what we saw earlier, where we saw employment falling. In the information sector, GDP is on a steady upward growth trajectory, and we would anticipate that to continue as investments in things like data centers continue across our state, which bring in a lot of our national income or our regional income. Management of companies and enterprises is also on a very strong upward trend. I provided you some of the numbers here, but I do encourage you to take a look at those slides at your leisure later on. There have been some other stories that are happening in our space, though. Wholesale trade, for example, was on a fairly decent upward trend up until the pandemic, in which it went down, and it never came back up. So wholesale trade has been fairly flat, and we do anticipate more of that as that space continues to shift in technology and location. Many of them are deciding to relocate. And then we also have our real estate and rental and leasing, a very strong upward trajectory. So for those of you connected to that space, that probably feels pretty good. And it continues to be strong, as especially in places like Wichita, Kansas City, Topeka, Lawrence, the rental market in commercial spaces continues to be very strong. And the healthcare and social assistance space has also been on the rise in Kansas in terms of its total productivity, and we're seeing very little signs of a slowdown in that space. So as with the employment situation, I will also give you the scenarios for GDP. Now, if we want to stay on these the trajectories we're on right now, we basically have to just keep doing what we've been doing. Slowly automate, stable business development, and so forth. If we want to grow in that space, we're going to have to invest in lower labor businesses, because labor is increasingly expensive and scarce, such as data centers, but that is not the only type. We need to have a positive tariff impact. There is a potential for that, and especially a lot of optimism from our businesses about how that might play out for us, bringing our supply chain closer to home, making us more resilient and faster. And we also need to automate quickly in order to stay nationally competitive. The slowdown I am, however, predicting for this next year because of challenges at the federal level. There are some issues when it comes to automation and investment when you're faced with uncertainty. We do have potential for exit of business. I would say of the ones in the slow, this is probably less of a concern for the short run, but they could see them moving closer to similar businesses as our industries agglomerate. But the slower production is more than likely going to happen as change unfolds within our industries, as they adjust their business practices, as they adopt new technology, and as they face that uncertainty. Now let's talk about how this affects our individuals, consumers, and specifically looking at their personal income. If you take a look at personal income in Kansas, it's an upward story. I've heard several economists talk about how it's not quite as fast as the rest of the nation, but I think Kansas tends to move a little bit slower, and that's okay. I will say it has outpaced inflation, which is a really good thing. We like to see that. It means real wages, the wages that buy the food, has been increasing over time. We can see that the pandemic actually had a positive impact on the trajectory of personal income. It was growing at a slower rate, and then after the pandemic, personal income started to increase at a faster rate, and we anticipate that trend to continue upwards. If it had continued on the same rate, you can see, it's on this side. This gray line here would be where we would be today if we had followed the same pattern. So we are clearly on a new trajectory, which is great to see. Now let's get a little bit closer to home, and I only have about a minute, and they're gonna kick me off, but when we look at Wichita in particular, we see a similar story. Our population, though, is growing. When we take a look at Wichita, many people in the rural areas are starting to move into the metropolitan areas, and so population is increasing. So a lot of the new population growth comes from outside. But when we take a look at those areas, that's not necessarily a good thing for the businesses that exist outside of that. But the Wichita metro area is growing, personal income is growing, and GDP is expected to grow. When we take a look at within the industries, again, this is largely a story of a slowdown, where durable goods manufacturing, I'm expecting a slight positive impact. Trade, transportation, utilities, I would say that's a zero change. Private education, health services, again, a zero change. But the government is an interesting one here because of a lot of changes that are happening that we're going to see some declines in employment in that space. And I do believe that those would continue onward. I will also note that employment and wages have been interesting in this area. I provided you a screenshot here, but I really do encourage you to go and explore this. This is one of our new dashboards on our website, and this dashboard has on it a whole lot of data that you can get really granular. This is for aerospace in particular. It shows employment, it shows establishments, it shows wages, and it shows average weekly wage in those different industries, and you can get very fine detail from this one. One of the interesting things I wanted to point out on this one was the number of establishments has been declining in aerospace in the Wichita metro area. I do think what's happening is we're making bigger entities rather than having lots of smaller entities. The location quotient is the white line on there. That just shows the fraction of the entire area that is in that space, and that's declining as well. I don't think that's a bad thing. It looks bad, but I think that really is just more large companies and fewer tiny ones. But the wages in that space have been on the rise, and that's something we want to see. So I encourage you to go play around with that. I'm going to be kicked off here, but the last thing I want to leave you with, you can take a look at these later, is this is all based on nationally collected data. And as you all know, that there is some challenges that are facing those national data collections. So if you have any say, I do encourage you to make that voice heard on making sure that those data sources are protected and more readily available, because all of our predictions depend on that timely, reliable data. So to conclude, Kansas is on the verge, but we have some things to do. We need to invest in our people. We need to invest in their education, training, and skills. We need to strengthen our data and insights. We need to collaborate, and we need to support our businesses. And all of this is going to require leaning into those things that you pointed out at the ICT Summit, where we need to foster relationships and work together, rowing in the same direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Becca. And Becca did a great job of talking about where we are right now in 2025 to get us started thinking about the future and the next 50 years. We are thrilled to acknowledge one of our sponsors who has done a fantastic job of ensuring today's event feels nothing short of premier. Let's take a moment to spotlight the Henry Helgerson Company and Image Resources.
Hello from the Helgerson Company. To all of you new to us and our longtime customers, we would briefly like to share a bit of our story with you. The Helgerson Company is a full-service contractor that provides decorating, setup, and organization for events of all sizes. We take care of hundreds of conventions, trade shows, and events year after year. We have over 80-plus years of excellent services. Our mission is to carry out our clients' vision and provide the best customer service experience in the trade show and convention industry. The Image Resources Group at the Helgerson Company is a premier provider of displays, specializing in trade show and museum exhibits, arena environments, lobby displays, banners, and murals. We eagerly anticipate partnering with you for continued success in the years ahead.
Next, it is my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Mark Esposito. Dr. Esposito, who I've met before, is a super nice guy. Super, super smart, nice guy. He is an internationally acclaimed expert on the fourth industrial revolution and artificial intelligence. His affiliation with the World Economic Forum places him at the cutting edge of AI and technology discourse worldwide. He is a professor of economics and strategy at both Hult International Business School and Harvard University, where he holds multiple influential positions. As an entrepreneur, Dr. Esposito co-founded Nexus Frontier Tech, a pioneer machine learning research firm, and the Circular Economy Alliance, an influential ed tech venture. Today, he'll explore how geopolitical turbulence, shifting alliances, and tech-driven governance models are redefining competitiveness, and how business and governments can successfully navigate and leverage these transitions. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Mark Esposito.
Good morning. Very nice to be here in Kansas. My second time within 2025 that I managed to come and see your beautiful state and to spend some time with the friends at Barton who have been hosting me since April as I joined as an executive in residence. I'd like to have a conversation with you today on where are we heading, and not because we control somehow the prediction on the future, but likely we can shape the direction. And I'll try maybe to give you a sense of what has changed from a perspective of global dynamics that are fundamentally reshuffling the way organizations, but equally states and country are changing. And then I'll try to zoom in more about Kansas and what can we see in the outlook for the next 50 years. Again, not precise, but mostly about reading the signals, where we would like to go and where do we see signals that the direction of travel has already initiated. We're definitely looking at a remobilization in the global environments. We no longer have the same legacy that we have inherited through the industrial policy of the 1950s, 60s, 70s, where many states and many countries have really proliferated their prosperity by building on a quite strong industrial foundation. We are definitely looking at what seems to be a cliche, but we are defragmenting at a much faster pace. We are having a larger degree of devolution. And we do see the rise of multilateral center of convergence, not only within the United States, but also across the world. When you're looking fundamentally at what are the sort of like forces that are driving our societal changes, you can really imagine that our touch points have fundamentally changed from before. First of all, we see that at the foundational level, we are rethinking manufacturing one more time. There's a number of different series for this, triggered likely by how a country had got learning from the COVID crisis, that over-dependency on extremely lean systems, but very offshored. They create a critical stance in the ability of country to be sovereign in the goods that they want to really use on every single day. We see more and more the trade is becoming tense, and around the world we do see convergence of conversation that are leading to the appearance of new forms of trade. They're no longer coming from a global distributed model, but more about the regional, nearshoring, or to some degree bilateral agreement structure. Now, trade naturally has been one of the drivers for prosperity for many countries around the world. Today, we notice that policy they are trying to move into some form of protectionism are likely going to reshuffle the economic landscape of entire region. Kansas is one of those examples. If you were kind of looking at the statistics that Dr. Becca was sharing with you before, we do see some form of contraction. It doesn't mean it's a decline. It just simply means there is a change in the chemistry of the economic composition that is signaling that we're changing the way we create value. That doesn't mean necessarily that we should be pessimistic about that, but clearly vigilant on the fact that a lot of different forces are at play these days. We see more and more area of concentration that are going to become critical in the next 50 years. You can say health is becoming a more important part of the conversation. Agri-tech and the conversation on food security around the world will continue to be critical. And of course, data centers have been one of the major protagonists of our last few months, where we notice an increasing amount of pressure on the ability for us to invest in data infrastructure, and it also is coming with the advent of a more diffuse and distributed use of technology like artificial intelligence. When we're looking moving forward, there are definitely few signals that will unfold in the next few years. We don't know exactly the composition, but we know they are in the making. One is quantum, which is largely going to reshuffle the way in which computation will allow us to get to a much faster synthesis on data, to the point that we're simply changing the computational algorithm that naturally unleashes to a number of possibilities we couldn't do before. We see this more and more about cognitive, so a lot of technology that is anthropomorphic, so it's largely shaped on the way we are. And so the impact might be on entry-level job, on redefining what is a firm, rethinking what we will call later on the invisible factories. So factories that are creating value, but they do not have a traditional or conventional structure as we used to see before. And this is going to equally fundamentally change our geostrategy. In a world in which technology is becoming probably the main driver of economic value, naturally strategy are going to become geostrategy or geotech strategies as we look in at the future. About 2 years ago, I came with this book together with two colleagues of mine. You see where the title Remobilization is coming from. We published this with MIT Press. The idea was mostly to engage in a conversation similar to the one we have today. We are not futurists. Nobody knows the future, as there is no data on the future. But we tended to entertain a conversation about where are the signals and can we eventually hypothesize some direction of travel, not because we see the future as deterministic, but because we want to delegate the opportunity to decision makers, policy makers, business leaders to shape in a direction that likely reflects what kind of society we want to have moving forward. This is not the first time that we have this conversation. At the World Economic Forum, where I've been working for about 13 years now, we started in 2020-21 something called the Great Reset. We felt the pandemic was an inflection point, but equally a watershed moment, where we were actually given the legitimacy to rethink and to challenge our assumptions. So you find today still a lot of really relevant work on the Great Reset initiative that the forum launched about 4 years ago. And so there's been a lot of inspiration about getting constituents and stakeholders around conversation about what is the direction of travel and can we influence it in a way that we can own it moving forward. Now, I'd like, ladies and gentlemen, to start getting a little bit more into the juice of the conversation. So geopolitics today is a technology game. From what we see fundamentally industrial capital, we see currently the Trump administration has largely enticed capital to go back into manufacturing. We are looking at redistribution of capital to the point that we will see more rise of industrial capacity, not necessarily on simple manufacturing, mostly on advanced manufacturing, but it is inevitable that industrial capital is coming back to the country. Not necessarily evenly distributed, but it is coming back to the country after about 2 decades of a sustained posture towards offshoring. We also see digital capital more and more. We start realizing that today capital is becoming largely anchored and perched around technology itself. So there's a conversation around how much data is going to reshape the condition of a transaction moving forward. To simplify this in slightly different words, whoever owns the data, it has the upper hand in defining the transactional mechanism between supply and demand. Data is no longer just implicit to a transaction itself. It's going to be likely one of the factors that will enhance dynamic pricing. At the World Economic Forum, we are estimating that by 2030, so 5 years from now, data will add roughly $5 to $7 trillion to the global economy. As a reference, we're operating around $100 trillion right now, so it's a significant percentage. By shifting the dimension of transaction from conventional to dynamic, meaning that whoever owns the data will have the opportunity to shape the price structure. Whoever owns the data will have the opportunity to structure the data for a better, deeper understanding of it. Whoever does not have the data will be in a form of technology dependence. Now, as geopolitics has become kind of the game, the name of the game, we notice that the economy, as AI has become a more predominant factor, is really about algorithms. And today, AI, it is the new factor of production. When I did my training in economics several years ago, I remember we used to talk about factors of productions like labor, land, capital. And in country where we had natural resources, you could argue that natural resources can be used to extract and generate value. Today, the very same conversation might be true, but we're adding a dimension on technology. So AI as a new form of a factor of production is really the new horizon of competitiveness we see globally. As the America First policy has shifted our production focus more and more into rethinking fundamentally manufacturing, we see more and more conversation about alternative to traditional forms of financing. Today, as you know, cryptocurrency are in a different phase of maturity. We're not yet at the level of programmable money, but in China, programmable money has been pioneering for a few years now. It's actually likely to imagine that one day, a digital dollar proposition that is controlled to some degree by a federal entity might make money codifiable but equally programmable. There are upside and downside for this. We can more easily incentivize sectors of the economy that might be largely disenfranchised by dynamics of competition that might be skewed or myopic. It's also true that as a point of alert or vigilance for all of us, do we really want to have programmable currency from the government perspective that will give to the government a degree of power and agency that we have never seen before in Western economies. And then there is data as a capital. It's coming with the fact that we're seeing more and more a concentration on projects that are bringing capital to building infrastructure for more use of technology. At the very moment we're using technology still in early stages, one of my colleagues at the University of Pennsylvania mentions in a kind of a catchphrase that the kind of AI we're using today is the worst kind of AI we'll ever use in our lifetime. We're still at the very early stages of something we don't necessarily fully understand. No one really has an understanding of what the technology will look like. It's coming from the fact that these AI labs, they are innovating at extremely fast pace, but adoption at the company level is at best incremental. So the spread between the speed of development of technology and the adoption rate will constantly create a form of tension. And so navigating the tension is becoming more and more an area where I would invite all of you to spend some time in thinking, engaging, having conversation, increasing your training. It's really one of those periods of our history where we're redefining the epistemology of value, and we're really shifting production from labor and capital to learning systems that can be constantly trained. Now, what happens when technology outpaces control? This is where, of course, no story comes only with an upside. We have to consider, these are some screenshots from a news article. Clearly, the increasing amount of outliers that are never being anticipated by our historical data might occur. We might find more and more pressure in a way that is outside the capacity. One example that you see there in the black screenshot is how the current electricity grid are going through excessive capacity demand. During the summer, I had actually a 2-day program with 35 CEOs of energy companies from the United States at Harvard. And the common denominator of the conversation is that at the moment, the grids are going through enormous amount of pressure. Will we be able to support our infrastructural expansion? There's a big question to really ask. The ability for us to integrate systemically technology in our life is not just a matter of policy. It's also a matter of whether we'll have an infrastructure that will be designed to sustain the degree of capacity moving forward. And so it's really one of the questions where, as I started my presentation, the future is largely about being shaped rather than something that will continue as an experience that has started in the past and simply happens through a trajectory. It's much more about the question mark on how will we be able to prioritize moving forward. Now, Kansas. I do not live in the region. I'm in Boston. I'm originally Canadian. So for me, the central part of the United States is not the most common space for investigation. And so I wanted to go deeper in understanding the reality of your state. Quite interesting on that. I started to realize that Kansas is transitioning from what we used to call a quiet corridor into something that might really become a footprint of global competitiveness. And I'm not saying this because I want to flatter you. I want to say this because I want to show you where the data tends to show signals that are positive in what is currently happening in your state. Now, Kansas has a number of interesting factors that I consider hidden engine for reinventing how we will produce by 2075. First of all, water. At the moment, it's not a conversation that feels critical every single day, but it's very likely that an increasing number of consumer behavior that is using a higher needs for technology will continue to generate pressure on our water supply. In some regions, water scarcity is already a national threat or a national security issue. We will see more and more that states that have access to water and technology to manage this, like water farms, will definitely have an advantage in comparison to states who will have to import water. We see more and more data center concentration. This is an area where we'll see some data center converging. Therefore, going back to the conversation we had before, we will see that the alignment on the global trends will find its localization in the strategy of the state as well, meaning we'll find ourselves at the right time, the right space, with the right level of conversation, and the right kind of capitalization on the data itself. Energy is transitioning more into a portfolio first. Later on, it'll become a hub. We'll see more bio-industrial capacity on food. This is a region that has always been very, very active in producing food supply and food security. The question is, what happens when you're blending agriculture with technology, and so you see what we see, we call agri-tech, is the fusion of technology advancing and accelerating the supply of food, like it has already happened in countries that had a much more difficult supply of food. Our supply chain will continue to be exposed, as a matter of fact. It's an opportunity for us to keep on rethinking whether or not we are designing resilience by design, not necessarily by pure accident. And so these are some of the major reasons why when we were doing the research, we were finding really positive incentives in the data on how the state can possibly move forward. Now, Kansas matters beyond Kansas for a number of different reasons. I think first of all, it's really rethinking healthcare. It's an opportunity for us to think as we are becoming more actually aging society. This is not only in the United States, it's a phenomenon we see globally. To what degree will we be able to move to a point of healthcare that will benefit from the greatest support that technology can give us today? It's not just about preventative medicine or telemedicine. It's really about using technology for largely changing the way in which we can holistically assess health, but also understanding this from a perspective of economic cost structure. Aerospace is going to be important. As you know, there is a significant shift towards what we call the space economy. The space economy is not just the exploration of space or what we see with rockets going out of the atmosphere. It's mostly the study on how through satellites, we're going to fundamentally rethinking connectivity, tracing, monitoring. Today, the investment on space is becoming quite significant, and there will be more and more conversation about, do we have to have a traditional infrastructure of communication on the ground, or can we rely greatly on satellite coverage? While this generates naturally an expansion of the business, it also displaces more conventional forms of communication technology that we've been using for several decades. So clearly, this is a space where a state like Kansas should make a decision, considering the strong aviation hub you have in the state. We'll see more and more the ability for technology, as we mentioned before, to shape across multiple dimensions, from energy to food to water. So clearly, Kansas is becoming almost like a laboratory. And this is, in fact, how we actually like to consider it. If we're making a comparison between Kansas, California, and Texas, California is an innovation powerhouse, and also the state and the country that has the greatest gravitas towards capitalization. Raising capital for technology company in California is being always a form of comparative advantage. Now, the problem with California is the exposure that the state has to climate, and also the fact that California is not rich in water, and they're actually very dependent on import. If you're looking at Texas as another powerhouse, largely dominating the energy market, but we have seen in recent years how Texas is really under pressure for the grid on power. And so clearly it's a state that has a degree of fragility that cannot be easily ignored. Kansas tends to happen to have a good balance between the geography. We know today that whoever will dominate tomorrow will be any country that will be able to blend the physical with the digital. And the strong rural roots that this state has really plays in favor of that kind of configuration. So we kind of see Kansas, for some reason, to become kind of uniquely positioned to really excel in the global economy, exactly because of what we have been discussing so far. It's a combination between convergence of factors that have started from the way the state has been developed, but also how the state has started to prioritize specific industry that could become critical in advancing in the next few years. I mentioned Kansas as a laboratory. I believe it's actually how we should see this. A lot of the work that I found out when I came at Wichita State University for the first time in April really proved to me that this is not just a place where we're teaching students, it's really a laboratory between educational institutions and companies. This has to go even deeper. We have to continue to think about laboratory because we want to run assumption, a hypothesis, run an experiment, really having test beds that allow us to really prove what we actually want to understand, especially in times of technology that is coming with the ability to train data, where we can learn by training the data, something that we didn't really know before. So you see, again, kind of a summary on where the laboratory wants to go, the agri-tech, the data center that will clearly create a digital backbone, You see this much more about biomanufacturing, which what I mentioned before is the ability for us to really tap on traditional industry with the support of technology and the energy corridors. There will be a combination of multiple forms of energy across first a portfolio, later on in terms of hubs. This is in light of also what we heard from the previous speaker. We have to learn how to build resilience. Resilience is not only about a form of strength, it's about the ability to withstand significant shocks. It is likely that in a highly interdependent world of ours, whatever is ahead of us will try to test the ability of a system to withstand the shock. And so resilience really has to be planned carefully in every single part of our conversation. Now, Kansas as a stress test for global resilience is not only a nice sentence to actually share with you. You notice that between digital sovereignty that will come with the ability for us to control data centers, to the volatility as a form of a laboratory. I think this in other parts of the world. We do see significant amount of effort in rethinking climate resilient towards infrastructure, towards food, towards water, towards diseases. We have to consider that the impact that the climate has is like coefficient that will not necessarily have just a drastic impact. It will just create a dynamic of change that sometimes is pushing system off balance. So how do we use the ability for the analogy of a laboratory to test the climate volatility? We'll see more and more about the fragility of the supply chain. It is likely that in a global trade tension, supply chain are going to go through an enormous amount of stress. We already discovered this in 2020, 2021 during COVID. We saw this with China's posture changing from soft power to hard power, reorganizing its internal market. And today, the sphere of influence that China has around the world is shifting to a significant number of countries in Southeast Asia, but also across the Gulf and in the African continent, and equally an infrastructure project in Latin America. So this is a country that will continue to create disruption. If you see disruption as a form of competition of some sort, it really allows us for conversation that needs to be prioritized based on the status quo we're coming from. And so more and more about rethinking to what degree we'll be able to see some of this factor part of our conversation as we're moving forward. Now, the signals of the aurora, as I like to call it, we already see them before. So if you're kind of looking at the conversation I had so far, in Kansas, we already seen that the direction of travel is pointing towards exactly this outlook. Again, there's no guarantee. Countries and states can easily change direction of travel quite easily. But when we're looking at fundamentally what we were able to collect in the preparation of this conference, already we see that the future economy is not just an abstract. It tends to really be supported by evidence that is proving to us that the state has been able to prioritize the right level of conversation, the right level of engagement, and hopefully the right level of investment that will come over to the country. There's one comment I'd like to make. As we become more dependent on technology, we know by the experience that any state that is able to equally proactively think about the governance of technology is accelerating even faster. The multiplier, it doesn't come in the trade-off between innovation that is creating the expediency of the private sector and legitimacy is coming from the governance of the public sector. Is really in the sweet spot in which we're really creating a space, almost symbiotic, in which governance is actually enticing innovation. And so how will we engage even more in a governance that is going to facilitate the acceleration? We know by now that while we're looking at data from the early adoption of technology into systems, when the innovation was actually coupled and married with the right level of governance oversight, it simply accelerates. So governance, I'd like to invite you, if you're coming from the public sector, from private sector, do not think is actually a hurdle. It's an opportunity to rethinking the innovation boundaries. It's also an opportunity for testing where is the boundary and the jagged frontier, where we like the private sector to drive and where we like the public sector to eventually support. So this is where I'd like you to start thinking in terms of a signal of the aurora, as I call it. We'll see more and more digital commons. So the common used to be a space that had something that we all share, like a park, like the ocean, like the land. Today, the concept of commons is shifting over to digital. You could argue the internet is a digital commons. The AI diffusion through generative model will continue to be a digital commons. Any form of data library and data knowledge that we're actually having, the idea that many of our identities today are on digital IDs. These are digital commons. So there will be a significant number of conversations that will have to happen on how do we navigate the narrative between the innovation of the commons and the governance required for that. I want to try to bring my time with you to a closure by sharing with you some reflection where we should be a little bit more vigilant. Now, the aurora doesn't come without dangers. We are exposed more and more to increasing equity divide. We have to make sure that the concentration of opportunity and capitals does not create an even wider gap of representation between those that have and those who don't really have. We are already today experiencing an increasing spread in the inequality of access. You could argue that prior to technology, you could fix a gap by financing, closing as much as possible, redistributing, hiring. Job and employment was the easiest way to really redistribute wealth, not necessarily from a top-down perspective, but from a point in which as people have resources that are material that can possibly invest again. So clearly, how will we be watchful that we're not necessarily going to exacerbate the divide even more? The tech dependence, at the moment, the world is in the hands of an oligopoly of technology companies. So how do we make sure that by preserving the critical role they have, they're not necessarily going to be a monopoly of data. They are completely decoupled from the reality of the local economies. And this is, again, up to both private and public sector to be watchful. And finally, the fact that we continue to see significant fragility in the supply chain because the challenges from climate shocks, economic shocks, rare material or mineral shocks likely will increase. So again, watchful on this. I want to finish by inviting you to think, who owns the aurora? Is Kansas the architect of its future or just a node in someone else's system? Hopefully by 2075, the answer will be, we shaped it. We were nobody else's nodes. I want to finish by basically a quote. The aurora borealis is a reminder that the most fleeting light can reveal the greatest power. And this is the wish I have for all of you working in Kansas. Thank you very much.
Okay, I wrote down, Mark, I have to tell you, I wrote down two things. Unique position. Kansas is in a unique position, and that is so cool to hear. I think we know that deep down. Let's make it happen. The other thing, he didn't say it this way, but I'm going to put it the Harpool way. Kansas is cool. That we've got some stuff going on, and it's nice to be in the middle, both physically on his slide with California and Texas, but we win. And so thank you, Mark, for that motivating, I found it extremely motivating, and presentation. As we approach our first break, we'd like to take a moment to express our deep gratitude to Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Kansas for their commitment to this program today and their commitment to community health, well-being, and continued economic growth.
At Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Kansas, we're committed to a healthier future for our neighbors. Our partnerships and work with local employers impacts the community and changes lives. Supporting the future of better health for all means working to ensure you have access to quality care without compromises.
At Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Kansas, we're prioritizing Kansas businesses. We're dedicated to helping those Kansans who work tirelessly to keep their business and communities going.
Thank you for your sponsorship and dedication, Blue Cross and Blue Shield. We'd like to acknowledge and thank the Wichita Area Outlook team made up of local business, government, and academic leaders who help us track the trends shaping our economy. Would members of the Kansas Economic Outlook team, or the Wichita Area Outlook team, please stand up? Yes? Yes, there they are. And thank you for all that you do during the year with CEDBR. As we go to our first break, grab some coffee, take some photos, meet new people, and enjoy yourself. We'll see you in 15 minutes. Okay, you guys are really following instructions and talking to new people. We need to stop now. So as we can reconvene, I trust you made some new connections and got some more coffee. And of course, those of us that are women spent most of the time in line. We want to highlight the release of CEDBR's 2025 economic forecast. Yes, it is fantastic. This reimagined publication is a valuable resource for anyone interested in the economic landscape of Kansas, and it's been placed at each of your seats. You get one to take with you today. But that's not all the data CEDBR has available to you. More data is available on their new data portal. You can view that using the QR code in your program. So as we continue on our journey to figure out what things are going to be like here in Kansas in 2075, we shift our attention to health, a topic that affects us all. To improve we are all interested in strategies to improve the health of all Kansans. We'd like to thank the Kansas Health Foundation for sponsoring the event today, as well as sending our next speaker, Ed O'Malley. I'm going to read your official Ed O'Malley information, but I could just condense it by saying leadership guru. But I will read the official one. Ed O'Malley became president and CEO of the Kansas Health Foundation after 15 years at the Kansas Leadership Center. He has continuously fostered the leadership and health of our communities. Today we celebrate the release of his new book, Leading Health: How You and 30,000 Kansans Help Communities Thrive. Ed and KHF has graciously, free gifts here, provided a copy for each of you to take with you today. We welcome Ed to the stage to share his insights after this short video.
At the Kansas Health Foundation, our bold vision is to make Kansas the healthiest state in the nation. This isn't just a vision, it's a call to action powered by Kansans. We believe a healthier Kansas is a goal we can achieve, and it starts with people like you. To reach #1 in the health rankings, it can't just be rhetoric. It has to be a movement to make a real impact on health in Kansas. And we must work together. If we want to lead the nation in health, we must broaden our definition of health to one that goes beyond doctors and healthcare, and instead includes everything impacting our ability to thrive. It's possible to impact the health of Kansans for generations. Now is the time. We're ready, and we invite you to join us in leading the way.
All right, thank Thank you, Dottie. And I want to give a big round of applause for Becca. This is Becca's first conference. This is a key event in our community. And Becca, I just want you to know how proud we all are of the work you're doing, carrying on the tradition of this phenomenal event. Let's give Becca and her team an amazing round of applause. So I'm honored that Becca gave me the opportunity to speak today. And most of you know me as the Kansas Health Foundation CEO recently, or the founder of the Kansas Leadership Center before that. But before moving to Wichita, my world was economic development, was chambers of commerce, was serving on the taxation committee in the legislature, serving on the economic development committee. Mentors like Mary Birch, the longtime phenomenal CEO of the Overland Park Chamber of Commerce, people like Governor Bill Graves, Lieutenant Governor Gary Scheer. These are people that mentored me and taught me in the early part of my career that we are only as strong in a community or a state as our business sector. That if it's not thriving, it is hard for anything else to work. So speaking today, Becca, is a little bit of an opportunity for me to revisit some of my roots and connect some of the dots between my work today and what all of us in this room care so much about, which is growing the economy of this region and this state. The title of this conversation today is The Economic Argument for Health. And we're using this today to introduce some new information to you. And what I could have done today is talked about what I would call the more standard argument, the more standard connection between economics and health. And that is, of course, that your economic status is the number one determinant of your health. There's a lot of things that go into your health, but your economic status is the most important determinant of your health. Those with greater economic opportunity, those with greater economic status have the ability to live healthier lives if they choose. That has been researched over and over. That is well documented. It is the biggest determinant of your health. A quick little example of that, just to help that point get hit home. Last year, I was injured. I like to think of myself as an athlete, not quite like I used to be a long time ago. I hit that magic number of 50 recently, but I still like to think of myself as an athlete. And I work out a lot, and I push myself. And I was injured, unable to do the activities that I love. And I needed physical therapy. And the physical therapist I wanted to go to wasn't covered by my health insurance. But I had the ability to go there anyway. I chose where I wanted to go because I happened to have that ability to make that choice. Because of my economic situation, I was able to get the care I needed so I could get back to what I care deeply about and live the healthiest life possible. Not everybody has that choice. So yes, the economic status is the biggest determinant of your health. So I could do a 25-minute talk on that, but that's not the speech we're going to give today. I want to go in reverse today. Today, what we want to explore and what we're introducing today, really for the first time, is a body of work that we are beginning. So we're previewing that work to you today. A body of work that we're previewing that is making the connection between health and economic outputs. So rather than saying our economic status is the biggest determinant of your health, we're trying to explore the reverse today. And we're previewing this work with you today. But before we get into that, I need to talk about a few things. And the most important one is to make sure we all understand what I'm talking about when I say health. I think there's health with a little h, and there's health with a big H. In my mind, little h health is health care. Such an amazing and important sector in our economy, and such an amazing and important resource for all of us to have access to. But health, with a capital H, is so much bigger than health care. So this is important to land because I want you to understand your connection to health. You know, we're the Kansas Health Foundation. We're not the Kansas Health Care Foundation. While we care deeply about health care, your health, our collective health, capital H health, is what we're talking about. So for example, my colleague Justin White is with me today. Justin used to be the CEO of the Boys and Girls Club. Justin every day was working on capital H health at the Boys and Girls Club. He was helping ensure there was a safe place for kids to be when they weren't in school. I saw my friend Ben Hutton here and some of his colleagues, Evan and Victor and others. Every day, Hutton Construction is working on health when they think about how to take care of their employees. That is working on health. There are a number of elected officials in the room today. When you are considering budgets, when you're considering the allocation of resources, whether you realize it or not, you are working on health. Maybe not health care, but you're working on the many factors that contribute to health in our community. Here's a way to think about it. I recently went to an experience up at the University of Kansas Hospital in Kansas City, their main location. It was a phenomenal experience. Maybe some of you have been there. They bring 12 to 15 civic players from around Kansas together several times each year. They bring them together for a day. And during that day, they show off all of the amazing things that can be done at the hospital. I was part of a simulation where a stroke patient arrived on the helipad and then was whisked away into an operating room and a blood clot taken out of that pretend patient's brain. Nothing pretend, it didn't feel pretend. My heart was racing as I watched these amazing doctors perform, in essence, a miracle. Or they let me dissect a pig's lung, and I learned all about what they can do to help you and me survive traumatic injuries to our organs and other issues like lung cancer. We were in the emergency room, newly expanded, I might add, which isn't always a good thing, is it, when you're expanding your emergency room? They tripled the size of it because trauma is on the rise. And I learned all about what they can do to save the lives of gunshot victims and others, car crash victims. Every conversation I was in, there was a similar graph that got shown, and it was an up and to the right graph. Every situation, there was more demand, more Kansans experiencing stroke than ever before, more trauma victims than ever before, increased rates of cancer, up and to the right. That was the norm. I asked every one of those brilliant physicians, what percentage of the up and to the right problem could be prevented? And what was fascinating is they, in essence, said almost all of it could be prevented. But the prevention doesn't happen in the doctor's office. The prevention happens in the community. The prevention happens based on our environment. So I want to lead from that to a few things that you need to know. Kansas used to be one of the healthiest states in the nation. In 1991, we were ranked number 8 in health. The ranking is done by United Health, the largest insurance company in America. And I actually love that fact. The fact that the ranking is produced by the largest private sector insurance company in America gives it great validity to me for a number of reasons, but including the fact that they will literally make more money if the states respond to this ranking, right? They will make more money when populations are healthier and need less health care, right? So in 1991, we were number 8 in America's health rankings, one of the healthiest states in the nation. Since that time, no state has fallen further in the health rankings. And by health, I mean capital H health. This isn't just health care. These are the broad determinants of our health. And again, United Health is incentivized to get that captured correctly as an insurance company. No state has fallen further. Most states are where they are. New Hampshire is always number 1, number 2, number 3. Utah, always up there real high in the rankings. Mississippi, always 49th or 50th. Kansas' story is different. Ours is a story of being one of the healthiest at number 8 and falling as low as number 31st 2 years ago. Steady decline. We were number 29 last year, number 28 this year. We can't claim we've turned the corner. We hope we have. So I want to start turning our attention to the economic argument for health. So here's what we did at the Kansas Health Foundation. We gathered our research team, and we looked at 1,000 different academic articles on the connection between your health, the health of your company, of your employees, the health of our community, the health of our state. We looked at 1,000 different articles that were exploring the connection between health and economic output. We then really dialed in to 225 of those articles, trying to find that connection. Now, there's enough we could talk about the other way, the standard way, that the more money you have, the healthier you are. And by the way, you should care about that too. Like, you should care about the fact that 39.2% of Kansans are under the ALICE threshold. ALICE stands for Asset Limited, Income Constrained, Employed. 39.2% of Kansans are under the ALICE threshold. They're the working poor. That's a threshold that sets a survival budget. Like, do they have enough money in the household to survive and cover the basic necessities? Almost 4 out of 10 Kansans can't meet a basic survival budget. So think about that for a minute, what that means for health, right? If your economic status powers your health, and that number is growing, that 39.2% number, that is on the rise. Poverty, by the way, is pretty stable in Kansas, but the ALICE population is growing. And as that number grows, my typical speech would be, our health will suffer. But we're looking at it in the reverse in this conversation. We reviewed these articles, dove deep into 225 of them, and here's what we want to convey today. It might sound simple, but I think it's quite profound. Not only does your economic status drive your health, but your health drives your economic situation. Now, we think about this personally a lot, right? It's obviously true. The healthier you are as an individual, the better chance you have to achieve economic success. Okay, the research affirmed that, and my guess is each of us can affirm that with our own lived experience. The research also showed at the company level, at the firm level, firms that have a healthier population in their workforce produce greater economic output. They are more successful in financial terms than companies whose workforce struggles with health. Okay? For example, lost productivity from poor employee health. What the research is showing, lost productivity cost firms lost productivity from poor health cost firms 2 to 4 times more than the direct cost of the medical spending done by an insurance provider or a patient or the company to help improve that person's health. So firms that have a population that is suffering from health suffer economically in what they're able to achieve. The research also shows this at the community and the state level, that communities that are healthier, states that are healthier, have greater economic output. They also attract greater outside investment, something we are desperately wanting here in Kansas. One study showed that a 1-year advancement in life expectancy led to a 5% increase in home values 5 years later. These things are linked. Here's another way of thinking about it. The former Surgeon General under President Trump in his first term, Dr. Jerome Adams, had this to say: "It's the concept that community health and economic prosperity are linked. When community health is poor, so is community prosperity. We can't have one without the other." So if health is a driver of our economy, is what our research is showing, and we're just previewing that today. We'll give you an opportunity to get the full report when we've had it finished here soon. But if health is a driver of our economy, our individual economy, our family's economy, our firm's economy, and our community economy, then this is very, very troubling. So this is the slide. Number 8, the high water mark was 1991. Fell as low 2 years ago, as I said before, to number 31. We now are at number 28 in 2025. We are number 29 in 2024. That upward arrow at the end of this diagram is aspirational. It's too early to say whether we've really turned the corner. But I want you to think for just a minute about what this research is suggesting. That if health is a determinant of our community's economy, if health is a determinant of our state's economic output, Kansas has got to turn this around. It's like this. I know there are some football fans in the room. Pete Nahara is here, right? Pete just went, in his description, behind enemy lines to go to the SEC to see his Fighting Irish play Arkansas. Okay? There are a lot of football fans here in the room. And when you follow your team closely, you know that one of the things you're always curious about, especially in the last decade or so, is how strong, what's the quality of the weight coach? What's the quality of the coach in charge of building the health and the strength of the team? As a K-Stater, by the way, I'm worried because I know the Jayhawks have a really good strength coach. Okay. That's what I'm talking about here. We can't succeed economically if our people's health is hurting. And compared to other states, that's what's happening. Now, health is a challenge everywhere, but what I love about this ranking is it's comparative to other states. So our ranking has declined faster than any other state in the last 35 years. And that is a drag on our economy, whether we like it or not. Whether we wake up in the morning and think about health, capital H health, broadly defined health, the determinants that lead to your health, your family's health, our community's health, and our state's health, whether we wake up in the morning and think about that or not, it is a factor in our economic success. It's a troubling factor and one that we must work together to turn around. I want to try to go into a little more detail here. How poor health shrinks the economy. So for individuals, okay, poor health reduces work capacity. I have a young adult. I have three young adults in my family right now, right? And having the chat with one of them recently about, you got to stay healthy so you can get to work, right? It's not. You don't want to not show up. You got to keep yourself healthy. You have to make good choice. All that type of stuff we coach our kids about. We know to be true that individuals who have poor health, it affects their work capacity. It leads to things like absenteeism or presenteeism. That might be a new term for you. That's the idea of people being present at work, but being unable to be productive. So poor health is on the rise in Kansas, and it leads to things like absenteeism, presenteeism. So they're there, but they can't work. They're there, but they're consumed with trying to find a way to schedule all their appointments for their health. Or they're there, they can't focus because they're depressed, or they're hurting, or they're in pain. Or they're there, but they're worried about the health of their loved ones. Right? So they're present, but not productive. It also leads to things like early retirement, the research is showing. Fewer people in the labor force. For companies, poor health leads to lower productivity, higher costs, greater worker compensation expenses. It's a drag on company performance, which we'll make more clear in the research when we release it shortly. And for communities and states, it drags down GDP. It shrinks the tax base, and it increases the budget strain. Fewer people working and paying taxes to provide the public benefits needed in the city, in the county, in the state. It's not a good recipe. But there's good news in this story. There's good news. If you're like me, a lot of times I get confused when I'm talking to healthcare experts. While we need the brilliant healthcare professionals, and by the way, when I left that experience at the University of Kansas Hospital, I left amazed with the brilliance of those professionals, but also worried that their brilliance for what they can heal or their brilliance for what they can cure is blinding us, like the people in this room, blinding us from our role in what we can prevent. So progress on this needs our medical professionals, of course. We need to support them. We need to fan the flames of the good work of people like Dean Hand at the College of Health Professions, building the workforce of the future that will take care of us from a health care perspective, yes. And we also must understand that we have a role. The book is titled Leading Health, How You and 30,000 Kansans Help Communities Thrive. That's kind of a weird title. By the way, it's a niche book. It won't make the bestseller list, okay? And real quick though, all serious notes, there's a lot of ego involved when you write a book, or a lot of like will anybody like it? I don't know if you'll like it. I hope you will. But please take it with you. Like, you don't know the ego crush it will be if I walk out of here and there are just lots of books left on tables. I mean, just do me a solid and just take it with you, okay? Some of you already have it. You were at an event the other day, some of you were given the book. Take another copy. It's okay, all right? Do me a favor. The book is making the argument that climbing health, leading to greater prosperity for Kansas, is really the work of people like the people in this room. That there are really 30,000, that's rough math, 30,000 Kansans we believe hold key roles of civic authority. That means they are elected officials, nonprofit executives, community-minded business CEOs. They're on boards of directors of chambers of commerce. They are pastors and rabbis. They are deans and university presidents. There are roughly, our back of the napkin math, 30,000. that hold key roles of authority and whose help we need to turn this around. So I have 3 things that I'd like to offer you. Number 1, the book. Please don't leave them behind. Number 2, if you scan this QR code, you'll be given access when the report is published to the formal research report our team is putting together on the link between your company's health and your company's progress. And on that QR code, if you're interested in being a part of a cohort of individuals, a cohort of companies who are working with the Kansas Health Foundation to explore this connection specifically about your company, you can express interest on that QR code. We would love to work with you to discover how to be a part of helping drive economic success for your company by helping your people be the strongest, the healthiest they can be. Thank you for the opportunity to be with you today. Know that we are in your corner as you work to build the health of your people. Thank you very much.
Take the book. Take many books. Thank you, Ed. That was great. Brought us down just a little bit. We were all like, we're so cool. We're still cool, but we need to recognize that we have the opportunity to be cooler in terms of the health of our fellow Kansas citizens. I'm going to do a shameless plug here. The Barton School is actively speaking of this concept of business leaders recognizing the health of their employees. And our executive MBA program starts again in 2026. We have been nationally recognized for having an entire course on how business leaders need to recognize the importance of health of their employees. And so, shameless plug, executive MBA, Barton School of Business, you're welcome. All right, before we welcome our 4th speaker, we'd like to take a moment to sincerely thank Cessna and Beechcraft by Textron Aviation. Their steadfast support as an industry sponsor has played a vital role in making this conference possible. We are truly grateful for their ongoing commitment to the center and this Economic Outlook Conference.
There's just something about soaring through the air. Cessna and Beechcraft aircraft have been inspiring the journey of flight for more than 95 years. From the young people who we invite on their first discovery flight, to our employees and the thousands of others who share our passion to design, to build, and support the machines that transform time, redefine the journey, connect us to a world of opportunities, today and beyond. With the most iconic aircraft and the most deliveries of any business and general aviation company in the world, we empower people to take flight by opening the skies.
Thank you again, Textron. Up next, we're joined by one of the most respected voices in aviation analysis, Richard Abdullah Fila. Is that what did I say it right? I said it wrong, I'm sorry. I'll get it right. Director of Aerodynamic Advisory. As a speaker, when you're given names, you practice them and you practice them, and the more you practice, the more you screw it up. He is director of aerodynamic advisory, where he advises aircraft manufacturers, suppliers, and financial institutions around the world. For my fellow Rotarians, downtown Rotarians, yes, Ebony. We have Ebony as the president of Downtown Rotary. We were gifted a presentation by Richard last year, and he's a big fan of ours. So we're back to we're cool. He writes publicly about aviation and defense, with regular columns in Aviation Week, Space Technology, and other publications. For decades, his insights have shaped how industry leaders and policymakers understand the forces driving aerospace markets. He is amazingly well-versed on the aviation history of this city and really celebrates everything. Those of you that work in aviation, he really celebrates what you all do and really appreciate his support of our city. So we'd like to thank NIAR, National Institute of Aviation Research, for helping us bring Richard here today and guide us through some of the turbulence shaping the sector with his presentation, Coping with Chaos, the Aircraft Industry in Strange Days. Please join me in welcoming Richard Abdulafia.
Well, thanks very much. It's great to be back in Wichita. Nothing wrong with shameless plugs. Nothing wrong at all. So I'm going to start with one. Why not? Okay. In the spirit of what Ed said, hey, take his book, because I too am about to become a first-time author. Okay, first-time co-author. My colleague and friend Kevin Michaels, co-managing director at Aerodynamic Advisory, and I have been hard at work on a book about the history of the business jet industry. And it should have taken us a year. It's taken us 3 because we kind of enjoy the process. It's been fun. A lot of help from our friends at Textron. Thank you, Textron. And it'll be published first quarter of next year. And in my ideal world, I would have an audience like this with the mayor and, business school deans and things like that. But it's aerospace, so if we get a couple of fellow, a couple dozen fellow aero nerds, I'll be happy. But the important thing is that when we give those books out at the air, I want them to take it. So right with you, Ed, take his book. Anyway, I'm looking forward to launching that book with Kevin here in Wichita, first quarter of next year, air capital of the world. But my job here today is my usual job, not the writing books part, which again has not featured prominently in my 38 years of my life because I've never done it. So what I'm here to do is, well, point to a bunch of squiggly lines and explain what's been happening in our glorious industry. Not to blame Ed, but I was going to say, all right, what's more important than aircraft? Well, okay, your health, fine, but anyway, aircraft, come on, man, aircraft. First of all, the big chart of global aircraft industry output. This industry, in terms of supply chain, everything what NIAR does, research and development, you put it all together, it's $1 trillion a year enterprise. But if you just look as a kind of proxy at the delivery of new aircraft, it's just 1/5 of that, right? And this isn't the research part, this isn't the sustainment part, this isn't the supply chain part, this is just the delivery of new aircraft and civil and military past 30 years or so. And what do you notice about it? We're not back to where we are. And that is the weirdest first takeaway. I'll try to limit myself to 3 big takeaways. We are not back to where we were. And that's not for reasons of demand. Demand is incredibly strong. I'm very pleased to say that the demand part of this industry doesn't matter anymore. It's all about supply. It's been that way for 3 or 4 years now. If you look at deliveries last year, you can see we actually took a bit of a hit relative to the previous year. If you could flip a switch tomorrow and get deliveries where market demand wants them, you'd be above the peak. You'd be nicely above the peak. But we're not, because of reasons of supply chain production. More on all of this in just a moment. Now, if you factor in the impact of that ridiculous Boeing strike that should have taken 53 hours, but somehow took 53 days, and the F-35 software snafus that resulted in, true story, Fort Worth becoming the 8th largest air force in the world. Be terrified, Kansas, because your neighbors to the south had a really big air force. A whole bunch of parked F-35s not delivered, waiting for software patches. You would have gotten to that little line up there, still not where the peak was. So we're waiting to get back to the peak in this industry. What's the problem? Don't get me started. If you look at the spectrum of trouble, nobody knows the troubles we've seen, going from sporadic, random stuff all the way to structural issues. You know, it's a lot of it, sort of dead center is labor at the end of the day. Labor has been a really big issue. One of the beating hearts of aerospace here in Wichita, of course, is Spirit Aerosystems. And guess what? They've got their own, they're in their own silo. Well, them and others. It's sometime back about 15 years ago, Boeing, and to a certain extent other manufacturers, began to regard aerostructures as somebody else's problem, you know, kind of like General Motors and Delphi back in the 1990s. Remember how well that went? Well, they decided the same idea. So they'll just raise their own capital, they'll come up with their own. It worked well until it didn't, because frankly, in the event of a serious downturn, you'll see in a moment, well, suffice to say that Spirit hopefully will soon be taken back within Boeing and all will be good again. But it's created a big challenge. And this is what it's like if you're Spirit. I sort of use this. It's not just Spirit, it's GKN. GKN went through this process too. I mentioned Spirit because, of course, they're such a big part of the Wichita aero economy. But if you look at any aerostructures company, this is what it was like. Sometime around 15 years ago, you had these boneheaded initiatives at Airbus and Boeing saying, let's make money together. That is to say, we make money and you don't. We want your margins. Okay. And then we're going to do this big production ramp up. Guess who's paying for all the capital expenditures, all that tooling? You are, sucker. Okay. This is starting to hurt. And then you've got the 737 MAX production shutdown. As you all know, the body of that jet is built here. Oh, that inventory problem, it's yours. Sorry. All that capital equipment you invested, sorry. And then you had icing on the cake, COVID, and of course the massive shutdown in the air industry that inevitably was the consequence of that. So, in other words, Spirit wasn't bad leadership. It wasn't a bad company. It was just hit like a piñata by all of these nasty blows. And here we are. Production reawakening. Hey, did you enjoy being beaten up by a baseball bat? Well, time to spool up again. And this is not just Spirit. Again, it's a lot of aerostructures companies. It's the greater ecosystem of building structures. Structures are about 35 to 40% of the value of any given aircraft. And of course, as the joke goes, how many parts does it take to build a plane? All of them. You have to have everything functioning to build a plane. So production reawakening, demand came back a lot stronger and faster than anybody predicted after the pandemic. It's not a surprise that this industry has been unable to meet the ramp. Now, is there a silver lining to all of this? Yeah, that'll be my third takeaway at the end of this presentation. Watch for the silver lining. Another factor has been that normally this industry kind of behaves like the rest of the economy. All the other sectors that you're spending time with today, which I don't understand because I've only done aircraft for 37 years, but I'm sure they're important, like health, you know, whatever. We used to be in tandem with those guys. You index output, the Federal Reserve, where former CEDBR Director Jeremy Hill went, the Federal Reserve keeps a wonderful data set of everything that is not what I do. It's called, I think, non-defense capital goods excluding aircraft, comma, Richard, you know, anyway, it's sort of, I feel a little personal. This data set is sort of aimed at me. But if you compare this data set with my data set, this is the first time ever where we haven't been in lockstep. What does that mean? It means if you're an aircraft company or supplier, all of a sudden you're last in line to hire people and buy things, rent property, build things. That hurts. You're getting smacked in the face with inflation that way. Normally, we lead the way out of a recession. Not this time. That's also been a really big challenge for everybody involved in this business. So there's a lot challenging going on. Now, looking at the air travel industry, and of course its huge demand for, well, Spirit Air Systems fuselages for the 737 and whatever, here's where we stand. On the left, you see the macroeconomic environment that, of course, drives air travel demand. And we compare previous quarter, every quarter we sort of do a comprehensive review of everything going on. Things are kind of in yellow. It's really weird. Everything going on in Washington, where I live, seems to be designed to create a recession, and they haven't succeeded yet. I mean, it's weird. It's like watching people try to shoot their own foot and missing. You know, you're just like, oh God. You know, so I'm a little concerned, but on the other hand, it hasn't happened yet, and I'm mindful of the greatest joke ever told in economics, which is that forecasters have successfully predicted 6 of the last 3 downturns. So maybe we'll get off okay. I don't know, but it's yellow. The positive side, though, look at the next bucket: people flying. People are flying. You know, the numbers are as great as I've ever seen them. I mean, terrific. Thank you, people. I'm part of it. We're all flying. Aircraft demand, not surprising. You know, people took a break from ordering planes, no big surprise there, and now they want them. Please, please, could we have our aircraft? And they're not getting them, which is the last bucket. Aircraft supply is getting a little better, but it's still pretty bad. You know, I mean, there's like 14,000 jets on backlog. Now, that doesn't mean you could, you know, get 14,000 delivered to people overnight, but it's kind of an index of confidence. And to the extent that people want aircraft, like I said, you could raise production 50% right now and people would be happy. They would absorb those jets. It's a question of building them. Anyway, it's a really weird mix of good and bad out there. It's hard to make sense of. Hence the title of my presentation, Strange Days, right? One other factor, and you know, since this is fundamentally an economics conference, I thought I'd introduce some big picture economics to the whole thing, but one of the weird aspects of this industry that makes it stranger than any other industry is that we're ultimately subject not just to demand, but to a bifurcation between the cost of capital and the cost of fuel. What does that mean? It means that if you take 2009 as an example, remember, everyone else in the world economy, 2008, 2009, the Great Recession, I think the biggest growth industry was looking behind people's sofa cushions for spare change or something. We actually saw accelerated growth. We were the only industry on the planet to see accelerated growth. Why is that? Because your cost of fuel was very high, thank you, China, and the cost of cash was, I believe, paired with the cost of dirt, courtesy of the local central bank. So, if you're an airline, you were obliged to order aircraft. Why? because your financing costs for those new jets are so low, and you're saving so much money by bringing in new, more fuel-efficient equipment that you're making money by buying aircraft. It's the weirdest thing. So where are we now? Okay, bottom line it. We don't know. I mean, interest rates. Interest rates are somewhere in the 5 zone. You know, President Trump seems to want to will them lower. For some reason, magic wand. I don't know. I don't know whether they will be lower. 5 isn't bad, not as good as 0. I like 0. Does 0 work for you? It works for me. And fuel, we don't know either. It was 80, it's now about 70. We don't know what it's going to be for the year, what's going to be for next year. If you know the future of fuel prices, buy your own island and, you know, make a bunch of money and buy your own island. But right now, things aren't bad. Not as good as they were in 2009, but not bad. It's a weird story. If you look at the situation between Airbus and Boeing, a lot of it is defined by our old friend, the 737, that really does drive so much of Wichita's aerospace output. I'll come to that in a moment. Just quickly, book-to-bill ratio, that is to say people ordering planes. You can see we had these crazy ratios of people ordering planes to delivering, heavily dominated by the 737 and A320. That drive fortunes here. Why wasn't last year such a crazy good year? What's the point of ordering planes if you're not going to get them till 2030 anyway? It was funny, you know, we went to all the major air shows and, you know, people were saying, what do you expect for orders? And I'm like, who cares? You can't build the planes anyway. Why are you ordering more jets? And everyone sort of thought that way too. So book to bill wasn't especially high, but we've got this crazy, insane backlog. And here's the ratio. If you look at the 737 relative to the A320, that's right here. The 737 is doing pretty good. You know, the MAX tragedies and everything that took place afterwards kind of, well, they cast a long shadow. But at the end of the day, the MAX is a pretty good jet. The problem is that its capabilities in terms of range at the larger end can't quite match the A321neo from Airbus. So as a consequence, if you look at backlogs, there's this, I call it Boeing's giant middle finger problem. Airbus is just going nuts with this A321. So the question becomes how quickly, and well, a couple questions. One, when does Boeing replace the 737 with something that also matches the A321, because the A321 is going nuts here? And in an ideal world for Wichita, do they simply say, okay, let's keep the MAX, but also do a middle market jet a little bit bigger that competes with the A321? The question to that one, I think, is unfortunately probably not, although maybe that's good for the 737 MAX. And the second is, when does Boeing introduce a new jet? If I had to put a number on it, I'd say they'll launch something in 28, 29, introduce it in 35, 36, maybe 37, somewhere in that zone. Airbus will probably follow. So in other words, from the standpoint of building MAX fuselages, I don't think you got much to worry about for 10 years, maybe 12, something along those lines. And again, that has a huge impact. And because Boeing, of course, will own Spirit, we hope, there's a very good chance that they do a big chunk of the new plane here anyway. So from the standpoint of de-risking Wichita, not in bad shape, not in bad shape at all. Now, the mix between single aisles and twin aisles, that's one big change in this industry. This used to be an industry that was 50% narrow bodies, 50% wide bodies. It's now more like 2/3, 1/3, which is ultimately very good for the 737. In other words, people were using single aisle jets to do more international routes. It's funny, I was never one of those Iceland Air backpackers 40 years ago. I never flew across the Atlantic in a single aisle jet just by happenstance. But over the past 2 years, I have only flown across the Atlantic in a single aisle jet. People are using single aisle jets to do more on international air networks. As I mentioned, a lot of ideas in this business for new jets. What's actually happening? Nothing. It is the weird, this is your menu of possible options that could occur, but nothing is in the pipeline. I like for there to be things. I like new things. But if you're a fan of new build production, there's nothing threatening that. There's nobody coming up with something that's going to disrupt. Are there disruptive ideas? Yes, very definitely. But it's going to be a while before people bring them to market. And one major challenge is that, frankly, we've had such a hard time delivering on the current generation of products that nobody really has the stomach to do anything risky. So ultimately, that's good for the great fuselage machine down there in the south part of town. A few comments on the business aircraft market, which I unfortunately didn't mean to give short shrift to. I love the business jet market, but not in bad shape at all. In terms of macroeconomics, about the same as the other one. Utilization, wow, people are flying these things. That's really good. And in terms of aircraft OEM health, also pretty good, not in bad shape. They're starting to deliver. The business aircraft market is a very strange story. We got on this plateau back about 15 years ago, but it's a weird plateau in that you had this strange split between big cabin aircraft and small cabin aircraft. And this is what this chart, more than any other, I think, explains what Wichita has experienced over the past 15 years. Wichita is the undisputed king of the smaller cabin aircraft. And up until 2009, small cabin and big cabin, or small medium cabin and big cabin, were about the same size. So the Great Recession happens, and a funny thing happens. The bottom end of the market, the small and medium cabin markets, fall by 56%. It's the worst economic catastrophe that I know of to hit this city. I remember giving the inaugural speech at the Wichita Aero Club in 2008. It was terrifying. Everything was falling apart. And of course, that's what led to the death. Beechcraft revived under Textron, but all of its jets died. Ultimately, it killed Learjet too. This was a catastrophic moment for Wichita, and kind of a heartbreaking one as well. The good news is things have stabilized. Things are even coming back a little bit on the small and mid-cabin market. But the big stuff, I can't tell you why, but it is all built elsewhere. Gulfstream, Montreal, Gulfstream in Savannah, Montreal, for Bombardier, and Dassault builds in France. Everything, this is a classic story of when bad things happen to good people. But again, things have stabilized. One couple of additional charts in my remaining time. One big industry change that we've seen over the past couple of years is the massive surge in global defense spending. And to understand that, all you have to do is pick up a newspaper. Anyone here still pick up newspapers? I still do. People don't like each other very much. And as a consequence, global defense spending has blown through $2 trillion a year. That's excluding such nice friendly places as Russia, North Korea, and Iran. The rest of the world is $2 trillion plus, and it would grow faster if they're having big supply chain issues too. What does that mean? It means two things. If you are a Wichita economic developer or somebody seeking new business in Wichita, yeah, there's not a lot of new stuff in the commercial world. Defense is where it's at. It's where you're going to put your economic development resources because this is enormous. As a matter of fact, this is a chart that shows military aircraft output in the U.S. Look at that. The big red over there is our friends, the F-35 down in Fort Worth, but there's the B-21, of course, in California. Spirit getting some B-21 work was a really major development. You can see the opportunities are pretty strong out there in the world of military aerospace. And, well, the other complication of this is that we've kind of seen this movie before. The last time we had strong civil and military markets was the Vietnam War. I was a 4-year-old boy watching Lost in Space on a black and white TV in my parents' home, but people who were there tell me that what happened was a crowding out effect. You had this enormous sucking sound of military demand that was better able to hire people because they had better ability to pass through costs to the government. This is the thing I think about when I look at the production ramp and the risk of civil resources, people mostly, but really anything, materials, what have you, being kind of taken away by the military side of things. So again, two things. I understand the impulse and importance of attracting additional military work to Wichita, and it seems to be working. And indeed, the Learjet facility has been reborn as the Bombardier Military Center of Excellence. Absolutely what they should be doing, and they've been doing very well with it, absolutely. But I'm also mindful that both on a national level, even a global level, that a lot of the productive resources we need on the civil aircraft industry are increasingly going to be siphoned away by the military side of the industry. Now, on the positive side, turn this into a positive, it means that military focused zones, like for example, Dallas-Fort Worth for certain, parts of Florida, parts of Southern California, are now structurally uncompetitive with you guys. I mean, there's no way you can have these monster military increases in output. You know, it's fun, you see that top slice, that B-21, that is the first plane of any sort built in California for about 10 years. So yes, there is a giant military aerospace cluster re-emerging in California, but it's all military. No one's gonna start to compete with that for productive resources. No one's gonna compete with you, therefore, by saying, oh, we should put a civil plant in California, or Dallas-Fort Worth, or wherever, Jacksonville, Florida, because they're so heavily dominated by military operations that take all of those resources away. So there might be an opportunity there. Anyway, just food for thought. It's been my privilege to address you with 8 seconds left. Thanks so much for listening, and great to be here again.
By his book. The takeaways, you all have your own. Once again, Wichita, our aircraft industry, our aircraft workers are cool, cooler than anybody, and it is a part of our heritage, and it's always nice for all of us, those of us that are not in the aircraft industry. We understand how important it is to us, and nobody makes a better fuselage than we do. All right, we have a special treat. Every year we recognize an individual or some individuals that are really good at recognizing the stock or projecting the stock market. So it is my pleasure to welcome John Toothaker, Private Wealth Manager at Knox Numis, who has a special recognition to announce.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me again. A big thanks to Dr. Becca for allowing us to continue our partnership. We're really excited about that. I'll point you to a couple charts real quick. Knox Numis, first of all, is an independent wealth management firm doing comprehensive financial planning and investment management along with other things. So there's my shameless plug. I didn't want to miss out. There you go. But yeah, we sponsor this stock market contest every year here for several years now. But one thing I want to point out on the left is, anybody notice anything? Pull out your phones, look real close at it, see if you notice anything there. What that's showing you is the different segments. In the yellow is the WSU students, both undergraduate and graduate students, and in the black is the business community. The red line across the top shows what the actual market returns were on September 1st when we were targeting for people to pick that. Anybody notice anything there? This is a very Kansas data chart. Okay, nobody wants to say anything. I wouldn't either. Okay, we're a very cautious group. We tend to underestimate positivity and outcomes that could be good because we have very smart economists around here and very smart speakers from out of town who say a lot about what I've heard today: uncertainty, challenges, stranger things, all kinds of challenges. But one thing that I know is people in this room and people like you all across the country are very resilient business leaders, and that tends to drive markets higher over long periods of time, despite little stretches where we're going to have some difficulty. So Alex Sutherland, here from Campus High School, a local Wichita student, was our winner this year. He was less pessimistic than others. His prediction was 6,450 on the S&P 500, and it actually closed at 6,415. So an incredibly tight guess on where that is. So big hands for Alex. Thank you. Congratulations. David Baltzer, I don't know that we should allow directors of economics to make predictions. That's a little, sounds cheaty to me. But congratulations to David Baltzer, who was unable to be here today. We'll make sure and get him recognized. And one last slide. If you've got your phones out, now is the time to pull that out. Take a minute to see where you think the markets are going to be next September 1st and see which you think will prevail, the uncertainty that we've talked about and that is everywhere and publicized heavily, or the optimism that business leaders across the country drive in terms of equity markets. So thank you very much. Again, we appreciate it and look forward to being a part of this going forward. Thank you.
All right, another break. Please enjoy this break with some refreshments while you network. We're going to have some cool trivia up here if you want to compete against your friends, possibly take their money on bets. We will begin again at, let's see, 10:35.
The conference will reconvene in 5 minutes. The conference will reconvene in 2 minutes. The conference will reconvene in 1 minute.
If you can make your way back to your table, that would be great. Thank you. All right, before you get too settled, I'm going to ask you, some of you, to stand again. If you are a first-timer to the Economic Outlook Conference, please stand up. Let's see you. Well, welcome. Hopefully, you will make this a tradition. How many of you, and you just raise your hand, I'll try to see you. How many of you, this is your 10th or longer? You've been to more than 10 of these. Yes? Way to go. Thank you for your support of our Center for Economic Development and Business Research and the Barton School and WSU. So they are your, the individuals that come back year after year. We certainly appreciate your presence. Your organizations appreciate your presence because you are taking back critical information for success purposes. So we want to move on to our second to last speaker, and both of these individuals are really insightful and dedicated and unique in their approaches to their subject matter, starting off with Miles Bassett. And Miles is founder of Prairie Code AI, a cutting-edge software development company that leverages artificial intelligence through the entire development life cycle to make advanced technology accessible and affordable for businesses of all sizes. That was a really long sentence. But I can tell you, after talking with Miles last evening at a dinner, Miles has a really encouraging, don't let me down here, Miles, an extremely positive perspective, an encouraging perspective, at least for me, when it comes to those two scary letters, AI. He will explore practical strategies for businesses and workers to harness AI's potential for growth rather than merely defending against disruption. Welcome to the stage, Miles Bassett.
As you've heard a few times today, the 2025 Kansas Economic Outlook Conference was tasked with looking forward to 2075 and imagining what Kansas could look like in 50 years. I was given the admittedly daunting task to look at this in terms of technology, automation, and artificial intelligence. So I want to start off here by unequivocally failing that challenge. I don't know what this is going to look like here in 50 years. I don't know what AI is going to look like in 5 years. But even if I don't know exactly where we're headed, I do know what we need to do next. So that's what I'm going to talk about today, the next steps we have to take, the necessary next steps that we have to take towards strategic adoption for AI in Kansas. Is this going to work? Oh, I'm going back there. This is not supposed to be a big picture of me right now. There we are. All right. So I believe that though it might not seem obvious, and a couple of people have hit on this today, that Kansas is actually uniquely positioned to benefit from the AI revolution that's occurring right now. Let's get that straight right now, that this is not a future prediction, this is not a maybe, sometimes Star Trek prediction. AI revolution is happening right now. The first time I encountered it was in 2015 professionally, and I thought that I was late to the game. So this is a right here, right now kind of thing. Here in Kansas, we're not a state that's regularly mentioned in conversations of technological advancements or innovation. We're not New York, we're not California. We don't have billion-dollar tech firms and investment firms on every street corner. And if you're a small business owner here in Kansas, you have the double whammy of challenges here. You're competing against bigger businesses with deeper pockets, deeper teams. And you're doing so from a state that many write off as flyover territory. But those challenges are exactly why I believe that we are going to win here, because AI acts as the great equalizer. It allows a 5-person team in Manhattan, Kansas, to compete with a 500-person team in Manhattan, New York. And similarly, I think that it has the same advantages for Kansas. It lets a state like ours compete with California and New York without needing their high costs, their infrastructure, or their attitude. We've got a couple of key advantages here in Kansas. We do have lower costs, so the amount that one business might spend on rent for one tech employee in, let's say, San Francisco, we can spend that here to buy an entire AI suite of software for your entire staff. Lower costs here, lower cost of living, also helps us to attract top talent so that tech nerds like myself realize we don't have to live in population centers in order to participate in the cutting edge technology being developed here. We have a practical mindset. We are not focused on the hype or the glam around all of this. We are focused on results. We have a strong work ethic. We're not afraid to learn new tools. And we have a strong community. Now, who here has actually been to something like New York City? If you walk down the street and you make eye contact with someone or say hi, they think you are a psycho, for sure. They don't have that community that we have here that ensures that a rising tide raises all ships. And so when one business succeeds with AI, others will surely follow. So that is my prediction for 2075, that Kansas will thrive, specifically due to the double underdog effect that I just described here of small businesses and Kansas and our advantages and we will thrive because of those who capitalize on all of this. But what do you care about my prediction? Who am I? My name is Miles Bassett. As the introduction said there, I am an entrepreneur. I am a software developer by trade, a technologist. I am a father, a husband, and a Kansas native. I own 2 businesses here in Kansas. Wildman Web Solutions is a digital marketing agency. We work primarily with small businesses across the state and across the country, building websites, managing social media, running ads, all that stuff that exists at the intersection between small business technology and marketing. We're able to serve those clients because of the technology behind the agency. We have our own CRM, our own automation suite, our own AI workforce that we can give to our small business clients and allow them to compete with businesses 100 times their size. I also have Prairie Code AI. This is my custom software development agency where we specialize in building AI-powered software for startups, existing businesses, and universities. So you might say that across both sides here, my day-to-day life consists of working with organizations of all shapes and sizes to adopt new technology, to look at technology differently. So that's what I want to do here today. My mission is not to talk about a bunch of high-level theory or philosophy. I also don't want to fill this with a bunch of technical jargon. If there's a few nerds in the crowd that want to really get into the weeds on it, grab me afterwards, we'll get coffee. I'm happy to do so. But this will not be that. My mission here is to help you to take advantage of the unique opportunity that I think is in front of us with practical advice, real examples, and tactical instructions. I want to give you a roadmap to go from A to B, from beginner to pro in using these AI tools and really adopting them to your professional life. And then more than that, more than just giving you these advantages so you can go home and take them home and use them, I want to inspire this room to be leaders in our state, to master this not just for your own advantage, but so that you can teach others. I want to dispel a couple of myths here about AI. First of all, is that you don't need to be super technical in order to figure this stuff out and start to adopt it. Secondly, you don't need a massive budget to get started here. A lot of these tools are free or no cost. There's no reason to hold off anymore. Because what we do need to do is get started now. Again, we're behind the game here, but we have an opportunity, a real opportunity to win big if we start now, and we have to be strategic about this. We can't just jump in willy-nilly without any kind of strategy. This stuff is complicated, and the consequences of this are real. So if we fumble this and AI doesn't take your job directly, someone using AI will. So this is my 4-step plan here. I got some of this material from Dan Martell. I recommend that you check out his podcast or his book. If you already do, this will look somewhat familiar, but I'm contextualizing us for here in Kansas. 4-step program. First of all, choose your weapon. We're going to pick a lean set of tools to get your business into the AI era. Step 2, prompt like a pro. We're going to learn how to actually speak the language of AI. Step 3, creating your learning rhythm. We all need to go back to school and learn how to learn in order to stay ahead of this curve. And then finally, we're going to become a director, not a doer. We're going to become the employee or the worker of tomorrow and focus on the qualities that only humans have that AI can't replace. So, step 1, choose your weapon. We're going to focus before we scale. The problem here is tool overwhelm. The line I got here, I love this line, is that most people die of indigestion, not starvation. There's way too many options out there. It's overwhelming. A new AI tool comes out every day, and it's impossible to keep up. Even for someone like me, I live and breathe this stuff every day, and it's impossible. You end up chasing every shiny object. You pull that one off the shelf, and you start to look at it, but then there's the new thing that comes out, and then you grab that, and then there's the other new thing, and that comes out, and you grab that, and you never end up applying any of these things, so you don't get the results. The result you get is the same problems with more confusion. You have another subscription on your bank account, another icon on your desktop. So the solution is actually the inverse of that. The problem is that you are going an inch deep and a mile wide. I need you to go an inch wide and a mile deep. Now, how do we go about doing that? First of all, I recommend you audit your daily tasks. Literally, just pay attention to what you're doing. Write it down. Look for repetitive, energy-draining, obnoxious tasks, something that AI can do. Look for groups of tasks. These could be customer emails, social media posts, bookkeeping, or data entry. Whatever it is for you, find that within your day and then pick two tools per task category to try to alleviate those pains. Now, you might say, Miles, you just told me to focus. Pick one thing. Why'd you say two? That's so you can test two things out and figure out which gives you the best result. These tools are very different. The AI models out there are very different. How they are prompted here is very different. So pick two, try them out, figure out which one gives you the best result and which feels the most natural to you. Then commit to 7 days of daily practice. And by this, I don't mean you start working on a Monday and then you forget about it till Friday and then you do 5 hours of it to make up for the whole week. Daily practice means daily. So commit a little bit of time every single day and expect some frustration in this. There will be a learning curve, but you'd be surprised at how much better the results you're seeing are by the end of the week than what you saw at the beginning. And finally, make it a habit. I recommend a task here called habit stacking. You can use this in anything that you want, whether you're learning AI or trying to work out better or eat better. The idea is that you grab the habit that you're wanting to inject into your life and you pair it with something that you're already doing. Every morning I get my coffee and I go to emails. So if I wanted to inject this new tool and learn how to use it, maybe I put it right there in between coffee, and before I open up my emails, I open up this AI tool and I do it for 20 minutes every morning. Small, consistent use beats sporadic use every time. And once you've mastered it, rinse and repeat. We're going back to the beginning here and trying this again. Step 2, prompt like a pro. You need to learn how to speak the language of AI. Now, you might have a friend, you might actually be this person that says, oh, I use AI every day. And they look over their shoulder and they have ChatGPT open and they type in, what's the weather going to be tomorrow? Where's the nearest taco place? Like, okay, you're using it as a search engine. And that's fine. It can be a good search engine, but you're not prompting like a power user. So let's look at this second example here. Act as an investor. Analyze this board packet and give me 5 critical questions I should ask the CEO. I guarantee when you walk into that boardroom, you're going to look like the most prepared person there. But why is that prompt better? What's the difference? That prompt has 4 basic parts, and every great prompt has these 4 parts at least. First of all, the role, act like X. It's the fun thing about AI, the cool thing about AI is that it's this massive amalgamation of knowledge and experience. It has tons of information, but it doesn't have an identity. There's nothing containing it or telling it how to interact with the world. And it turns out it's really hard to make real decisions or give real results if you don't have a real identity. So give it that identity. Tell it, act like a small business marketing expert. Act like a Kansas farm equipment specialist. Act like the most successful restaurant owner in Wichita. Second, give it context. In the age of AI, context is king. The more information it has about you and the challenge it faces, the better the results are going to be. So give it everything. Give it bank statements for your financial planning. Give it customer feedback for product development or sales data for marketing strategy. Quick note here on security and privacy. Please don't go and grab a free GPT account and upload your full bank statements. I have to say this. There are tools out there that have specific a specific security feature in there, so make sure that if you are using this with proprietary information or sensitive information, that you are using something with the appropriate security. Finally, or I guess third here is the command. This is the one that everyone wants to jump to immediately. This is where you tell it what to do. Tell it in as much specificity as possible. Create a marketing plan, draft a customer response email, whatever it is, tell it what to do, and then don't skimp on this last step. That is format. Specify how you want it to answer. Should it just answer right there in chat, or should it put this in a PDF that you can take away with you? Should this be a list, a CSV, outputting JSON, or actually writing code for you? Tell it how you want it to answer. So here's a great example from my personal life. And how I was able to leverage AI in a more advanced way and leveraging this exact prompting schedule. So for those of you who do know me personally out there, you know I was blessed with my second daughter over the summer. It was wonderful, and I wanted to take some time with my wife and new daughter and the toddler terrorizing my home. But it's hard to step away as an entrepreneur, as a business owner. So I built an AI agent me for my team to ask questions of. And here's the prompt that I gave it. Act like me, the CEO of a tech company, expert developer, versed with technologies X, Y, and Z, and leader who knows our systems and clients. The context, I gave it CRM data, information about our customers, our standard operating procedures so that you knew how we were actually doing something. I gave it access to my email so it could look back and see the conversations I had with clients. I gave it access to my calendar so it knew the meetings that I had recently. And all of my meetings with clients are recorded and then transcribed and deposited into the CRM. So this AI had plenty of context about what we do, how we do it, and the conversations I'd had with clients recently. My command, answer my team's questions while I'm away as if I were responding myself. And the format, provide detailed responses with specific technical guidance, links, resources, and necessary context. The results there were not magic, but they were very, very helpful in that we set this up as a basic chat on our internal system, and my staff was able to ask this agent questions and get a lot of these answered instead of reaching out and bugging me while I was out. Quick pro tip here, in addition to prompting here, use this reverse engineering hack. So as you're going through this process and you're using these tools, you're probably not just going to one-shot it. You're probably going to have to go back and forth with the agent a little bit, say, no, not like that, no, I wanted you to do this, add this in there. But once you get to a good result, ask it to write the prompt that would have gotten me here faster. It'll actually write a prompt for you that is exactly what you should have said at the very beginning of the conversation in order to arrive where you are now. Study that prompt and learn while you work. You can even copy that prompt and save it for later for future use. So this is something that you're going to repeat. Now you've picked your tools, you've learned how to prompt. Now you need to learn how to stay ahead of the curve. This is a constantly evolving space, and we all need to learn how to learn this. And this part isn't just for you. This is where we get into the 50-year timeline. This is for your kids. This is for our grandkids as well. We all need to learn how to learn this. Many adults stop learning after high school, and a lot of school systems, up to and including universities, are not able to teach this material. Not through lack of trying, but because it updates so frequently. This is updating weekly, not conveniently on a semester-based schedule. So some schools are even trying to ban this, saying it's some sort of cheating or something, but then you come out the other end and we're in a market that's demanding use of these tools. And once you stop learning, for those of you who are maybe a little bit later in their careers and we don't want to learn this new tool, we're a little bit hesitant to pick this up, but once you stop learning, you start dying. So if you want to remain in this game, you're going to have to pick this up and learn how this stuff works. And then for our kids, for our future, our kids are going to grow up competing against AI-savvy peers locally, nationally, and internationally, so it's in our best interest to teach them how to learn this material. Another quick tip and hack for you in order to start learning quickly. We talked about habit stacking earlier. I bet that almost everyone in this room has this same terrible habit I do of just doom scrolling through social media entirely too frequently. So let's take that bad habit and turn it into learning time. Pick your favorite social media app. For me, it's YouTube. Maybe you've got TikTok or Instagram or whatever it is. Open it up and search for AI plus your industry. Find some content creators, pages, or channels, and then engage with them. Comment on the videos, like it, follow it, whatever your platform demands, and then let the algorithm do its job. It wants to give you more of what you like, and you're telling it, I like AI education. And so now when you're sitting there mindlessly scrolling, you are now learning about the next era of technology. But that's not enough. That's just the beginning of your AI learning system, the daily 5-minute regimen, hopefully maybe a lot more than that, for some of us, of scrolling through social media and learning about AI. In addition, I recommend weekly a 30-minute mastermind, where I have a regular meeting every Wednesday that I meet with other people in the marketing profession, and we talk about how we're using AI. This is a virtual meeting of people all across the country, and we just get to talk about what's working, what's not, and what we're doing next. I recommend you set up something similarly, either in person in your communities or virtually. 1 hour a month, you go back and do a re-audit of your tools. Reevaluate that step one we did earlier. See what you're doing every day, look at the tools that you have, and ask, what have you learned over the last month? What can be done better? What new tools are out there? What new features are now launched in the tools that you're already using that demand reevaluation? What new pain points do you have? And then once every couple of months or quarters, attend an event just like this one that has AI speakers and network with peers, advisors, and vendors. Again, one of our big advantages here in Kansas is our community. So if you ask, Kansans will answer. Just ask. Now we've selected our tools. We have learned how to prompt. We've built an AI learning system. What's next? We need to become the worker of tomorrow. Become a director, not a doer. AI is coming, it's already here, and we need to focus on what you uniquely bring to the table. What can you do that AI can't replace? This is a non-exhaustive list, but a good start here. Vision, seeing a future that should be, not could be or might be, but should be. It implies this moral judgment. Taste, this is the ability to know the difference between something good and something great. AI can generate 15,000 AI ads in front of you, but only you will be able to know which one of those will resonate with your audience. Imagine listening to a piece of music and thinking, oh yeah, that's pretty good, that makes me happy, versus listening to a masterpiece that touches your soul. That's taste. And then care, or some might call emotional intelligence, I would say focus on genuine human interaction. Make eye contact, shake some hands, just a real unforced laugh in conversation, and build relationships with people. This is something that AI cannot do. Also know that these are not just descriptors. These aren't just things that we have, these are skills that we can develop. Now, what do I mean by becoming a director rather than a doer? To be a director, we need to stop being busy. And yes, I know the room I'm talking to here, and asking you all to not be busy is like asking a fish to stop swimming. But we have to step back away from these small tasks. If your day is all task work, you're just doing AI's job for tomorrow. In a couple of years, AI is going to be doing 99% of that to-do list and doing it better than you. So right now, you need to focus your time and energy on strategy, relationships, and vision. Then work on upgrading your taste. Study the best of the best in your industry and understand what separates the wheat from the chaff. Understand what makes someone truly great. Then simplify your thinking. You know, there's this level of mastery that you get to when you can explain a complex subject simply. You start learning something, you get a little bit better, you get a little bit better, you master it, and then you can explain it to a 5-year-old. And it turns out if you can explain a complex subject to a child, then you can probably explain it to an AI model, and that's a very valuable skill. Finally, practice self-reflection. Get feedback from your team, customers, your family, anywhere you can get it, and ask yourself genuinely, am I more effective? Is what I'm doing with AI making me better? Is it making me use my time more effectively? And then do the hard part and adapt. Let's go back to the beginning here. I believe that Kansas sits at a unique intersection of challenges and advantages that allows us to see outsized benefits in this AI revolution. The same things that make a business owner in Kansas difficult, or being a business owner in Kansas difficult, are the same reasons that we are going to win. In summary, they have higher costs, they have tons of hype, and they have the same tools that we have access to. What we have lower costs, and that means more investment in AI and infrastructure. We value results over hype, which can lead to better adoption. We have a strong community that shares fast, and we have the work ethic of an underdog. So my final point here is just that we are positioned to win big if we stand and take our place now. So here's the next steps as I wrap up. The AI revolution has already begun. We're already here. We're already in the middle of it. And this is an important note, but your adoption journey may start today. And this isn't just about you. This isn't about you just learning AI and bringing it back to yourself. This is so that you can master it and help others to adopt. My call to action here is start today, this week. Go and complete your task audit and pick your first tools if you haven't already. This month, establish that daily AI routine of education and improvement. This quarter, over the next couple of months, connect with other Kansans. Join a community that's talking about this in your industry, and if you don't have one or can't find one, make one. I guarantee you're not the only one searching for this. And by the end of this year, you can establish yourself as the AI-savvy leader in your industry. At the beginning, I promised that this talk would be primarily about practical advice, real examples, and tactical instructions. And in an effort to fulfill on that promise, I've developed a guide for you here, specifically for the attendees of this conference. You can scan this QR code, download the PDF. You don't have to input your email or anything like that. It's all free, no strings attached. And in there, you will find first a list of resources. This is websites, online courses, podcasts, however you like to digest media to help you get started on this AI adoption journey. And then you'll find 10 step-by-step instructionals walking you through setting up AI systems and automated workflows in your business. There's items across different industries, different tasks being automated or taken care of in there, and there are systems of different technological advancement or complexity. So you can start very, very simple, or if you are a little bit more savvy, you can grab one of the more complicated ones. And all of the tools referenced in this guide are free or low cost, so there's no excuse to not start today. Now, I've given you a process. I've given you tips and tricks and hacks, and now I've given you step-by-step instructions. My challenge to you is that while everyone is thinking about AI and talking about AI and thinking about talking about AI, I want you to go do it. Kansas, go do it. It starts today. It starts with you. Let's show them how it's done.
I told you, it's cool. He makes it just right there for us to take. Before we welcome our final speaker and the closing comments, we'd like to take a moment to sincerely thank all of our contributing sponsors. This event would not be possible without their support.
In addition to our major sponsors, the Center for Economic Development and Business Research would like to thank the following organizations for underwriting some of the costs for this morning's conference.
Before our closing remarks, I'd like to introduce our final speaker, and that is Warren Martin, Executive Director of Kansas Strong. Warren previously served as Executive Director of the Kansas Oil Museum and General Tommy Franks Leadership Institute and Museum, and was the primary presenter at all Inspired Leadership Experiences. He has been leading leadership workshops, presenting keynote presentations, and consulting for Fortune 500 corporations and nonprofits for 30 years. He also is, I would classify him as the biggest champion of Kansas gas and oil production in the state of Kansas. So, Warren, I welcome you to the stage.
Well, good afternoon, or no, good morning. I am standing between you and lunch and afternoon, and I know how anxious you are to get to the lunch, so I will make this as short as I possibly can. I want to thank you for inviting me to be a part of this economic outlook. And what I want to talk about is I want to start with the fact that everything we've heard a lot about innovation. We've heard a lot about things that we hope are going to come in Kansas, things that we're planning to come in Kansas. But all of those things are going to take energy. Energy, by definition, is the ability to do work. And I want to kind of maybe change the framework that you have in your mind about energy, because we tend to live in a place where we have adequate energy that we can turn on and off, that we can utilize whenever we want. But we've failed to realize that energy is a world market. It is dependent highly on the world. I've had the pleasure of building buildings and working in 28 different countries around the world. One of those countries that I worked in was a country called Pakistan. Pakistan is a very energy-deprived country. And so I would start out every single day. I was working with teenagers, training them how to do building, how to lay block, how to pour concrete, how to tie steel, all of those things. And I would start out every single day the same way. I'd get up at 4:30 in the morning, and I'd go down to the butcher shop. And I went down to the butcher shop. At the butcher shop, we weren't going out and picking out our steaks here and our chicken breast over here. No, we'd go down to the butcher shop, and I'd say, I'll take those 10 chickens that are running around right there, and I'll take that one goat that's tied up to the fence. And the butcher would immediately start butchering them right then and there because there was very little refrigeration. In fact, in the village we were in, there was no refrigeration in Pakistan. Whatever meat you processed that day, you ate that day because there was no refrigeration. While the butcher was processing that meat, I would then walk down to the other end of town, down by the river, and I would buy my block of ice that would be our ice that we would utilize for the day. We'd wrap it up in burlap, put it onto a cart, and we'd start walking back to go pick up our meat so that we could start our day. I did that every single morning. But I noticed when I'd pick up my block of ice, we'd wrap it up in burlap, put it on a cart that would be pulled by a water buffalo. I would have all of these kids that would come around me, these kids that were 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. They would be following along behind me, following behind this cart. And I thought at first it was because I was the foreigner that's walking through their village, and they were just, attracted by the foreigner walking through the village, until one day that water buffalo that was in front of me defecated on the ground. Now, for those of you who went to KU, that means pooped. No, I'm teasing. Water buffalo defecated on the ground. And when the water buffalo defecated on the ground, all these kids went into a mad frenzy. They started running to the side of the road, racing each other, grabbing grass off the side of the road, and then racing each other to see who could pick up that buffalo patty first. The first kid that got there reached down, picked up that buffalo patty, and started working the grass into that buffalo patty. I was intrigued. So I started watching this kid, then I started following this kid, and he worked that buffalo patty all the way home until he got to his house. And when he got to his house, he flattened it out into a nice patty, and he slapped it on the south side of his wall of his house. And he put it on the side of his wall, and all over Pakistan, you see these homes that have these patties on the south side of the wall with a handprint right in the middle of it. And they stick it on the wall, they let it dry in the sun, and then when it dries enough in the sun and begins to peel off, now it's good to use, and they can go pull it off the side of the wall, take it into their house, and that's what they're going to use to cook their meals and warm their homes with. These kids that are following me every single day have zero chance of competing with my kids and my grandkids, because instead of learning math, instead of learning reading, instead of learning technology, instead of learning AI, they are following around behind a water buffalo collecting energy for their family. That's in the world right now, today. I want to give you some statistics that might just completely blow your mind, because we think that there's plenty of energy in the world today, but there's not. Do you realize that approximately 60% of the population of the world today is what's classified as energy deprived, meaning they don't have access to enough affordable and reliable energy to be able to compete in the world market? Do you realize that about 40% of the population of the world today, predominantly in Africa and Asia, still depends on firewood or biofuels like animal dung for the heating of their homes, cooking of their meals, or both? Do you realize that approximately 20% of the population of the world today survives utilizing less energy per year than it takes to run the refrigerator in your house? And they all want energy. They all want more energy. They want energy to be able to compete on the world market. In fact, today we do not even produce enough energy to meet those demands that we take advantage of and take for granted every single day. And all of those people want more energy. Energy demand is doing nothing but increasing. In fact, the United Nations, the EIA, and the IEA, they all predict that by the year 2050, we are going to need 28% more energy per year than we currently produce. Add to that, between now and 2050, it's estimated we're going to add about 1.7 billion, with a B, billion people to the planet. The more people you have, the more energy it's going to take. We're going to need 28% more energy by the year 2050 than we currently have now by their analysis. And that analysis was before the AI boom really hit. We're in desperate need of energy. Which is why, if you've noticed, if you've been paying attention to the energy markets in any way, shape, or form, you've noticed that there's not nearly as many stories recently in the past couple years. There's not nearly as many stories about energy transition. Why? Because the focus has changed, and the concern that people have, the concern that energy companies have, the concern that people forecasting the future are really looking at is how in the world are we going to be able to produce enough energy to meet the demands that are coming without pushing people into poverty. Looking forward between now and 2075, I predict that you're going to hear more and more conversations about energy poverty. The greatest threat to the environment today is poverty. Nothing is more damaging to the environment than poverty. And in Kansas, where we have all the access that we have, we're not immune to the effects. We're not immune to those impacts. Do you realize that before the pandemic, the average Kansas family, the average middle-class Kansas family, was spending about 2.5% of their total income on their energy needs? Following the pandemic, now the average Kansas middle-class family is spending about 6% of their total income on their energy needs. Economists have long held that about 6% is that breaking point when people begin changing their lifestyle, where they begin changing their consumer decisions. When they start changing how they live and the size of their homes and cars, they begin to make changes. But consider this. Before the pandemic, the average Kansas family that was living below the poverty line was spending about 8% of their total income on their energy needs. Today, the average family that lives below the poverty line, depending on which region of the state they live in, is spending about 13 to 15% of their total income on their energy needs. Go talk to anyone that works in nonprofits or churches, and you will find that the number one thing that people call for assistance with and aid with is help paying their energy bills. And a lot of people will say, well, they just need to utilize less energy. That's not the problem. The fact is you have to utilize a certain amount of energy to have basic needs to be able to house a family in Kansas. And the reality is that a person living below the poverty line tends to utilize about as much energy as a middle-class family does, even though they have a smaller lifestyle. Why? Because their houses are less efficient, their cars are less efficient, their appliances are less efficient. We heard a little bit earlier talking about how important health is with the capital H. This falls in that category. In order for those kids, in order for those students to be able to compete, energy is vital. Energy is the ability to do work. Energy is the ability to do work. And we're going to need every available source of energy that we can find between now and 2050. We are going to need every available source of energy that we can find in order to meet the growing demands that are coming. Do you realize today that 56% of energy in the world is provided by petroleum alone? 56% of energy in the world today is provided by petroleum. Fast forward to 2050, the IEA, the EIA, and the United Nations all predict, unless governments intervene, at that point in time, the markets are driving it towards the conclusion that at that point in time, about 50% of energy in the world will still be being provided by oil and natural gas. But at that point, that's not a decrease. At that point, we will actually be providing more energy from oil and natural gas than we are now, but the market will have grown by that much. Energy is vital. Energy is vital for any of the things that we've talked about today. Whether you want to talk about trains and planes and automobiles, whether you want to talk about health, whether you want to talk about any of those things, oil and natural gas is going to be a central part of that energy solution moving forward. And energy is going to be vital for us to acquire and utilize in more efficient ways that are more environmentally friendly so that we can accomplish all of the wonderful things that we have talked about here today. Here in Kansas, we have a deep history in the oil and gas industry. We can go all the way back to 1915 when Stapleton No. 1 was hit, and Stapleton No. 1 launched the first mid-continental oil boom. It was a huge oil boom that took place in the El Dorado oil field just outside of town here. Between 1915 and 1919, Kansas provided that one county in Kansas produced 9% of the world's oil. That 9% of the world's oil was essential to a little conflict known as World War I, the first mechanized war, the first war that really came down to whichever side actually won the battle depended on which side ran out of oil first and which side did not. That was the oil that won World War I. So much so that the British Parliament said from the floor of Parliament that the Allies floated to victory on a wave of oil. It was that oil field that led to farmers and ranchers becoming millionaires. And one of those farmer ranchers was a guy by the name of Jake Mullendick, who used his newfound fortune to begin building airplanes in Wichita and made Wichita the air capital of the world. Oil has a deep history, and we continue to have an important aspect in our play today. The average oil well in Kansas produces about 2 barrels of oil a day. It's what's known as a stripper well. Stripper wells are vital. Stripper wells here in the United States, with Kansas being the 11th leading state in the United States in the production of oil, is essential to our national security. It's essential to the Kansas economic economy. Our oil and gas industry right now provides about 119 direct and indirect jobs here in the state. It provides for over $5.2 billion in employment income on an annual basis. In fact, there are dozens of counties here in Kansas, and mainly western Kansas, that 20 to 40% of the jobs in that county are in the oil and gas industry. There are 12 counties that get over 20% of their revenue from the oil and gas industry. But it's not just a historical part of our state. It's not just a current part of our state. It is going to be an essential part of our future industries. It's going to be an essential part of us moving forward. The reality is oil and natural gas is the densest, most transportable form of energy that we have in the world. You can load up a barrel of oil here in Kansas and ship it all the way around the world. And when you ship it around the world and you open it up on the other side of the world, you have just as much energy in that barrel as you had when it was here in Kansas. That's why we have to compete on that world market. When you're driving down the road and you see one of these trucks that says LNG on the side of it, liquid natural gas, do you realize that when you see that truck, this is how dense it is. When you see that truck that has taken natural gas and condensed it down into a liquid form, when that truck gets to its destination and is brought back to a gaseous state, that one truck will now become over 600 trucks of natural gas. Oil and natural gas are an essential part of Kansas, our history, our present, and it will be a part of our future. I want to challenge you, as you've been taught or been shared with a lot of ideas today about futures in industries and different aspects of where our state is headed. I want to challenge you to put into that consideration where we are headed when it comes to energy. Because the reality is we have to grow our energy by 28% between now and 2050. We have to grow our energy by 28% per year. It is going to take every available form of energy that we have. It is going to take every available form of energy that we have, and the reality is oil and natural gas is going to be a central part of that. And we want that oil produced here. Because here in the United States, we do a better job producing oil and natural gas than any other state or any other country in the world. We do it in a more environmentally conscious way than any other nation on earth. It provides for our economy, it provides jobs, but most importantly, it provides the energy that enables Kansans to work. And as we move forward, we cannot accomplish a single thing that was talked about on this stage today unless we are able to provide the energy, because energy, by definition, is the ability to do work. Thank you very much.
CEDBR, the Barton School, and WSU express our thanks and appreciation to all the sponsors. We also appreciate you for getting up in the middle of the night to come down here and hang with us during this conference. The Economic Outlook Conference is changing. Ooh. Starting next year, we will have a new format. It will also have a new name that next year we all will be attending the Kansas Economic Outlook Summit. A three-day gathering designed to bring leaders together more intentionally to strengthen their relationships and to ensure we are all rowing in the same direction. The theme will be Elevate Kansas, a call to rise higher together, building on today's insights to create action and impact. We hope you'll join us as we take the next step forward, cultivating not just dialogue, but meaningful progress for the future of our state. Thank you all for what you do for our city and our state, and thank you for attending today. To provide our closing remarks, I'd like to welcome to the stage my boss, Larissa Jenin, Dean of the School of Business at Wichita State University.
Thank you. Well, it's so wonderful to see so many of you. Many of you are our employers for the talent that we're providing. Many of you are serving on many of our boards. We have 16. Many of you are partnering with us. You're supporting us, and we are just so excited that we are able to do this with you, and I know we can do more, and we can create new partnerships. Before we bring this year's conference to a close, I wanted to take a moment to thank our host, Dottie Harpool. Dottie has given decades of service to the Barton schools, teaching, mentoring, guiding with wisdom and compassion. As she prepares to retire at the end of this semester, we recognize the countless lives she has touched and the deep legacy she leaves behind. Dottie, on behalf of the Barton School and all of us here today, we thank you. Today has been full of valuable insights about the challenges ahead, the opportunities within reach, and the choices that will shape Kansas for the next 50 years. The data and analysis we've heard matters, but what matters most is how we're going to use it, how we're going to apply it. How are we going to amplify it? This room is filled with leaders and visionaries, and I hope to leave here inspired to imagine what's possible and to act in ways that move Kansas forward. At the Barton School of Business, for almost 100 years, we will be 100 years old, and wow, we're going to have a celebration with all of you for the entire year. But at the Barton School of Business, on a daily basis, we focus on contributing to Wichita's economic prosperity, creating the talent pipeline, empowering new entrepreneurs to launch new ventures, to scale new ventures, and really transform Wichita in an award-winning city known for innovation, entrepreneurship, and technological advancements. And we often talk about what it means to bloom as you are part of the Barton School's journey. To bloom is to grow, to rise, and to flourish. If cultivated, each bloom becomes bigger than the last, creating a full and healthy ecosystem. We're committed to blooming not just in the classroom, but in our partnership with business community and the economic life of our state. And gatherings like this today are part of this cultivation. The Center for Economic Development and Business Research is one of the Barton's signature and great assets in this work. CDBR takes data and makes it meaningful through economic forecasting, custom consulting, building resources that allow businesses, communities, and leaders across Kansas to make informed decisions. Their mission is simple but powerful: to use research and analysis in service of prosperity for all Kansas. I want to take a moment to recognize Dr. Becca Selby-Leach for her vision and leadership of CDBR. Becca, you are carrying the center into the future with creativity, determination, and we are grateful. That creativity also transformed into what I believe an award-winning outfit for today. And to the CDBR staff and students, thank you for your dedication and for all the hard work that went into making this event a success. Please join me in a round of applause to all the people who made this event so impactful and so wonderful. We are also grateful to our sponsors. Thank you to our presenting sponsor, Evergy, for your leadership and generosity, to our elite and industry sponsors, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Kansas, Henry Helgerson Company, Kansas Health Foundation, and Textron Aviation. Your partnership is vital, and to all of our additional sponsors, thank you for helping make this day possible. I'd love to put on the screen a couple of upcoming events, and we're going to be hosting 2 executives in residence. All of these events are available to public, so we would love to invite all of you and your companies. Our executive in residence, Maggie Topping, is going to take stage on October 7th in Woolsey Hall, and she's going to focus on the topic Driving Innovation Forward, Textron's Aviation's Balanced Approach to AI, Talent, and Transformation of Work. It's going to be in the format of a keynote fireside chat, and together with her, the CIO of Textron Aviation will be engaging in an insightful conversation. Maggie also is serving on the Dean's Advisory Board, and I'm grateful for her engagement and generosity of time and expertise. Our next event is Linda Jackson. She's going to focus, she's also executive in residence for fall semester, Leading with Impact, the Power of Communication to Connect, Inspire, and Transform. She's coming to us from London, England. She has been inspiring, empowering, and guiding presidents of different countries, different companies, and I would encourage you to be joining us for that event, and she's going to be spending quite a bit of time with us, so you'll get a chance to meet her. Finally, thank you to all of you for being here today. Your engagement, your ideas, and your commitment to Kansas' future are what allow us to bloom together. And we're just getting started. We're excited to expand, as Dottie mentioned, this event into a bigger and bolder movement. And the new name will be Kansas Economic Outlook Summit next year, and hope to see you and your teams there. Safe travels, enjoy the rest of the evening, go Shockers, and the best is yet to come. Thank you.